All right, thanks, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Let's see. You'll have to forgive me, since we're now back to live, do we have to do anything special in regards to roll call per new policies? All right, well, there are all of us in attendance, so we're going to go ahead and move on. I got shaking heads. So the first item up for us is the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review those? And if so, do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes for February 22nd, 22.
I'll second that.
Very good. Any comments? All right, motion to approve the minutes as recorded. Opposed? All right, they pass unanimously. All right, well, before we get into the public comments section, I wanted to recognize Mr. Jack Semino up to help define what the role of the planning board is in regards to certain requests that come to us, specifically a subdivision and how that's reviewed.
It's a fairly lengthy agenda tonight. Two of your cases are subdivision cases. And so those are what we call quasi-judicial when they get to the town board. So the town board will only be getting sworn testimony when it gets to them after you make your recommendation. So your role, we ask you to kind of follow that quasi-judicial process, but your role is to base your recommendations on does the applicant and the design meet the standards of the ordinance or not. So that's your sole point. It's got to be based on the facts, and we ask you to build the facts just as we would ask the town board. With respect to the rezoning and the text amendments, those you have a little bit more flexibility than you would for the quasi-judicial items. But nonetheless, when you do make your recommendation on the text amendments and the rezoning, we do need you to state whether the case is reasonable in the public interest and also whether it complies with the long-range plans. So does that, Mr. Chairman, cover the issues?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. So up next, we have public comments. It looks like we have 5 speakers. I will begin. I'll do my best. I'm sorry if I butcher your names. You'll have 3 minutes, so I'll ask you to go ahead and come to the dais, introduce yourself, name and address for the record, and then your 3 minutes will begin. So first of all, we have Rachel Zwip. I believe under the new policy, it is not allowed to defer minutes to others. Is that correct?
If you want to use your discretion to allow it, you can.
So I do have the ability to allow it. There are only 5 speakers, so in that case, I will allow it. So Rachel, you'd like to defer yours to Ms. Nguyen, you said?
Yes, correct.
All right, up next, David Doctor. No, you need to come to the dais and put your name and address on the record, please.
David Doctor, resident 13515 Serenity Street. We're within 250 feet of the proposed Valais subdivision development. We have submitted written comments, and I'll be brief. We bring 2 items to the board's attention, one of which you can do nothing about, simply to raise your awareness. It has to do with the use of the mandatory requirement of retention basins for stormwater runoff that's required by Mecklenburg County. We can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about it, but there's increasing awareness. The U.S. Forestry Department, the Environmental Protection Agency, many forward-looking states, many forward-looking cities are increasingly using forestation to deal with stormwater runoff. So the alternative that you're faced with as a result of Mecklenburg County rules is that the developer is going to have to strip all of the lovely forestry that's there now and create a pit that stormwater runs into. So, again, we just raise that for heightened awareness. The other matter has to do with the connection of Serenity Street during the construction phase to the proposed development. And what we request is, and we've visited with Mr. Bowman a number of times about this. He's sensitive to the matter. But what we request is that Serenity Street not be opened to the development until such time as the development is ready for final paving. The purpose there is to keep the heavy construction traffic off a Huntersville residential street. It is final improved with curbs, gutters, sidewalk, landscaping, etc. We witnessed when the development in our area on Banter was under construction and Serenity Street was final paved, that there was considerable damage to the street, to the roundabout that exists in that area. And I think if you check your records with Public Works, you'll find that there was considerable amount of reconstruction that was necessary after Banter was done. Serenity Street was under city maintenance at the time. So we simply ask that Serenity Street not be opened until such time as the small development area off Delwood, which is 15 homes, be ready for final paving. That's all we have to say.
All right, thank you so much. All right, up next, we have Dwayne Torres, I'm sorry, Torres, perhaps? Is Dwayne here? As before, please put your name and address on the record, and then you have 3 minutes.
Sorry?
You put your name and address on the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay. So my name is Dwayne Turner. Address 8416 Ewan Circle. Not in the community, but I am here representing the community, licensed realtor and commercial broker, as well as chair for Fair and Affordable Housing Advisory Group. I just wanted to make my presence today to speak on behalf of the residents of Pottstown. There was some questioning regarding the new development that has been in place as well as proposed. The one thing that we are trying to be sensitive of in the community is of the tax. One of the things are the tax hikes, given that the people in the community typically are at an income level that is not increasing, as well as with the tax rates of the properties in the neighborhood. It's a matter of, I feel, involvement, inclusion, and at times exclusion. The residents of the community, they are looking at alternative measures to increase value in the properties around the community. However, there's a development already in place. There's been bucking against the development because, again, it's not it doesn't represent the interests of the community. Let's be clear. It just doesn't represent the interests, and I feel that with proper voice, they can help to articulate these things and maybe have some reconsideration as to the development. I personally am not a person who is against redevelopment. I am personally also very mindful of including the people who are in that development. I'm from another city who I've seen this happen before, and I'm looking to, if we could, create a way for everyone involved to be satisfied with the development. So the tax rates, as we see, have been changed in the year of 2019. Assessment building have been going with Vermilion for many years prior to that. So again, the tax rates with the current populace of the community, it is changing, and the property values are changing. However, it's going to get to a point, I feel it's going to get to a point where, they're going to be priced out of the community, based upon the trends of development here in Charlotte. We have a attainable housing problem here, and Pottstown is one of the remaining communities that is very historic and historically African American. And there's a lot of integrity and history that they are looking to preserve. There's people who've been there 5 generations. So I think what we're asking on the behalf of Pottstown is inclusion and having a voice to be more of a driver to what's happening with that development, as opposed to having their voice mauled. So.
All right, well, thank you for that, and I apologize for misreading your name.
No problem.
Thank you. Up next, we have Mark McClain. Mark?
I just all have to pronounce that. So my name is Mark McClanahan. Thank you. This is my first meeting here.
Your address, please. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Excuse me?
Your address, please, for the public record.
So my name is Mark McClanahan. My address is 6731 Constitution Lane in Charlotte. This is my first meeting here. Welcome Thank you for welcoming here and everyone else that's here. I'm here really on a fact-finding mission. Just wanted to introduce myself on behalf of my client. I'm a commercial real estate broker with SV and Blackstream. My client is Ronnie Henson with North Mecklenburg Properties, and I have 3 listings for his properties. One is on Church Street. The other one is other 3 are on North Old Statesville Road. And then the third one is on Holbrook. So I'm really here for a fact-finding mission and to meet the members of the community. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Up next, Mr. Nate Bowman, do you want to speak, or are you just here to? Okay, very good. All right, up last, we have Verona Wynn. You'll have 6 minutes as Rachel's time has been deferred to you. And just for those in attendance and viewing, during this public hearing process, we don't have the opportunity to ask questions, so it's merely an opportunity to present for our consideration and not an active engagement process. So I just want that to be on the record too. Verona, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Verona Wynn, and I live at 13219 New Haven Drive. My property adjoins Valais Village, and I am a member of North Mecklenburg Communities United, and I'm also here for that organization's representation of Pottstown. There are many reasons why I oppose the building of Valais Village. Number 1, the properties or parcels that include Valais Village has at least one parcel without clear title that came from the town of Huntersville. I have researched this thoroughly to determine through North Carolina 1 geospatial computer mapping and the county's geospatial computer mapping, and a online title search firm has indicated that they could not find any other titles attached to property 01908-108, which is attached to the Rosenwald School property. The search says that this property was sold by Hannah Holbrook in 1899 to what was then known as Huntersville Missionary Baptist Church and is now known as St. Philip Baptist Church. So the deed book for this particular property is found at 140 on pages 126 through 128. Second, I oppose the development because of the adverse economic impact that it will have on my community, Pottstown. Now, I sold Mr. Bowman some of that property, 27 acres. But I did not know then how involved the town was in fostering high-level development, high property homes being built in adjacent properties to ours. We thought that others would be able to develop that property for low-income persons living in Pottstown or elsewhere. And so what we know now is that the tax map, number 63, is big. I've ran out of the house, so I forgot to bring the big one that I bought from the town that shows now Vermilion with over 1,000 homes. Monteith development, I think is Place, one is part, that one's Place, is included in our tax map. And we a little bitty community of 150 homes at most now. And we dwindled down from 300 in the 80s to 150. The town of Huntersville promised in their annexation papers when Sarah McCauley was mayor that we'd be urbanized with extended utilities that the town has not provided since that time. No new sidewalks, no new curbs. We have water drainage, holding places, holding water for after the rains have come. And so we know that, as the gentleman earlier said, we get priced out of our current homes. Most of the people are over 65 who live there. So can they afford the new taxes? No. And you should take that into consideration. Now, that may not be legal, but it will be moral to hold off, not sanction his development, because he wants to come further. He still wants to keep coming on and surrounding our development and squeezing out the neighborhood persons who have low income. If they're going to live there, it might be feasible in their minds to say move, but they're trying to move to a income neighborhood that they can afford, and that might be hard. All right, we know that the tax map shows we are encroached. And when a few weeks ago, when the town board was looking at the rescue plan dollars, the assistant manager said that because of that tax bracket and income level, with the whole tax map, number 63, we wouldn't get any extra or any specific dollars from the town of Huntersville for what is now the basic part of Pottstown. All right. Another point I'd like to make is that the trees in Valais Village are older than I am, older than 70 years. They haven't been touched for over 70 years. When Randy Quillen was mayor, he approached my mom to get that land to make it a greenway, which means he told her that there were a lot of hardwood trees that had not been touched, and it would be a perfect place for a Huntersville greenway to connect this side, or I should say Main Street side through to Holbrook side, the communities. Mr. Bowman decimates trees. I've got pictures going down Holbrook that shows how big bulldozers are just making it all red clay. And so that red clay,
Ms. Nguyen?
there.
Ms. Nguyen,
Yes.
you're at 7.5 minutes. I'd like to give you one more minute if you'd like.
I can end up with the idea that this is also historic property. It contains the Rosenwald School. It surrounds the Rosenwald School and St. Philip Baptist Church. Very historic African-American properties in the town that should not be overwhelmed by more development. Vermilion contains over 1,000 homes. Thank you for my time.
Ms. Nguyen, thank you, and I'm sure your passion will be heard and understood by this board and those beyond. With that, we will move into our action agenda. I believe we have a agenda change.
Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move item number 4E up to the third item, 4C.
Very good. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, so that agenda change item, that item will become the new third item. All right, so we're now, Frank?
Can you name those for me real quick?
Yes, so the item E, the Hill Street subdivision, will now be heard before all three text amendments. So, all right, so we will now move to item A, the before discussed Valais subdivision. I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we get started, I would like to make available the staff report for the Valais Village. It will be important just to follow along here tonight, but also at the town board meeting. So if anybody wants this copy of Valais Village, would you raise your hand? I'll be happy to get you one. Thank you.
Staff.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just want to make that available for people in the audience that might want to follow along. Enter the staff report into the record for Valais subdivision sketch plan. The site has frontage on Delwood and Central. You see the dark line and then the crossed hatch line. So the dark line covers 31.837 acres in total, but the development area is actually the northern half of that property. So this map kind of shows the aerial photography with the subdivision laid on top of it. And so the entire property of the 31 acres is kind of in the light color, but that yellow line represents the northern half of that property. So that's the only portion of this property that's getting developed, okay? And so the other thing I want to point out, Ms. Wynn mentioned about the historic properties, but last night the town board approved Huntersville School Number 2, which is Rosenwald School, as a historic property. So the Landmarks Commission in the town of Huntersville have designated that a historic building, and these are just a couple of the photos that were in that report. So that is actually official now, okay? So the details of this, as I mentioned, the overall tract was 31.837 acres. The piece of property that's being subdivided is 16.62. Today it's zoned neighborhood residential. So this is not rezoning. This is just asking for a subdivision approval with the zoning that's it has on it for single-family homes, 36 lots. The proposed density is 2.1 units an acre for just the 16.62 acres. But if you take the entirety of the tract in, it's 1.15 units for the 31 plus acres. But again, that southern property is likely to be developed. So just provide that as just information. The details of the lots, they're all over 60 feet wide. Why that is important is if they were less than 60 feet wide, then they'd have to start providing on-street parking. So the wider widths do not require on-street parking. And the lot width or the lot size range is anywhere from 5,106 square feet to 9,000 with an average of 7,800 plus square feet. So I do want to clarify a section of the staff report. And that is this on page 3, number 12. So initially, the plan was to have next to St. Philip's Baptist Church, an area that was a buffer of the new subdivision from that church at 16.5 feet from that. Now, the code requires a 20-foot buffer around a subdivision. And so initially, the developer was going to ask for a modification of that. However, they are withdrawing that. So that's what's going to happen is that subdivision street is going to move further south, at least 3.5 feet to get the full 20-foot of buffer required between St. Philip's Baptist Church and the new subdivision. So they will not be asking for a modification of that. How that will be done is the road And let's see, I got this, I'll just use this map up here so everybody can see. What's going to happen is the road is going to just shift slightly this way, so it's going to get further away from that so that they can get the total of 20 feet there. So something else was mentioned right after that is the right-of-way width for Road A. So that is a very narrow strip of land, okay? And the Town Engineering Standards Manual says that the town planning director and the town engineer can modify a typical roadway width. So a typical roadway width without having, without the kind of a relaxation of the standards would be 51 feet wide, okay? But what we have here is two lots on either side. One's 318 Delwood, the other one's 410, and there's, unfortunately, the small print is, but it was in your agenda packet. This was from Stuart Gray of the Historic Landmarks Commission. So we sent the subdivision plan in its entirety to Mr. Gray, and he said, thank you for bringing this to our attention. 410 Delwood is a historic Alexander house that has been found to be eligible for National Register, so an important structure. 318 Delwood is circa 1915 that was like an original part of Pottstown neighborhood and may merit recognition and protection. The plan below does not pose any significant negative impact to the historic character of the houses. So what we were trying to do as the town engineer and the town planning director is let's not impact those properties. So what we are not requiring the typical 20-foot wide street, 3.5-foot curb and gutter, grass strip and so forth. If that's to come, that's to work with those property owners. So just wanted to get that on the record that the town engineer and the town planning director have done that and for the reasons that I just stated, okay?
So Jack, to clarify that, does that mean the road would be allowed, but the sidewalk and those would be optional?
So as it looks like it will work, we will accept 9-foot travel lanes, 2 9-foot travel lanes, 1.5 foot of curb and gutter on either side, so that's 3 foot, and then a 4-foot sidewalk would go to 25 feet wide, so that would fit in a 25 foot. You can go, if it was 28 foot, whatever that width might be, you can get a wider sidewalk. So we would like to be able to see at least a sidewalk installed there so folks can walk that way, but it would be on one side of the street and there would not be the typical grass strip with a street tree in it. Okay? Thank you. So the other thing I want to mention is the...
1 second, Jack.
Yes, sir.
Since we're at this point, I have a question about this, if I may. Thank you. Excuse me. So along with that, Jack, it's just like down at the Phillips Church, there's a 20-foot buffer required. So the town has waived the requirement for buffers here?
Right, so this is a right-of-way, road right-of-way, so this is what is going to be used here. There is not room for 20-foot buffers in here.
So this is a lot of modification. I mean, it's not normal to me. I'm sure it's allowed, but normally we get modification requests to do this type of thing.
No, that's not quite right. So
All right.
if you remember Holbrook's right behind Town Center. That was the same situation where there was a narrow street that rolled out to Hillcrest. And so there was no 20-foot buffer. That's just going to be the street and the sidewalk that's installed there. So this is typically what we do. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes. So the other thing I would mention is the block length. And so there is, you can see in this portion of the development, it's a total of 674 feet between street intersections. In more urban conditions, which is what this qualifies as, it is recommended to be anywhere from 250 to 500. So the town board, there's a section in the zoning ordinance that says the block pattern should continue to establish a development pattern at the project edge where longer block would reduce the number of railroad grade crossings, major stream crossings, or where larger blocks would result in an arrangement of streets and connections, lots and public spaces more consistent with this article and Article 7 of these regulations. The town board may authorize greater block length at the time of subdivision sketch plan review and approval. So we as staff support that, and The reason is that, one, you've got, if there was a connection, it would be in this area here. You could see there's a creek, and there's some significant trees in this particular area. Next to that is the historic property. So this is the Holbrook, this is the Delwood Center, which is the former Rosenwald School. And the other thing is they could have a driveway connecting, a street connecting over here, but that's really not going to serve much of a purpose and would actually disrupt the homes that are already out in this particular area. So for those reasons, I wanted to get it on the record that that's why the staff is going to support the town board modifying that. So I wanted to get that out there as well. So as part of the staff report, we identify, what's the criteria and what are they doing to meet that criteria. So it's just some of the things that I want to point out is when this subdivision was first coming in, we wanted to make sure that the lots were honoring the orientation of the existing homes on the streets. And so you can see where the entry lots are now facing the existing streets and matching up with the neighbors on either side. So that was one of the comments that we made. And the other is this kind of shows the trees, the significant trees that are in this particular area here that are going to be saved to meet the town standards requirements for protection of trees. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. As far as what the 2040 plan says, it just so happens this property is right in between a mixed-use center and a moderate density area. So it's right in between those two. The mixed-use center is considered much more higher intensity of development. The moderate density is intended for residential subdivisions, generally within a 1 unit to 3 units per acre. So this is within that 2040 plan. So in conclusion, in the staff report, we've indicated that staff found that the application was complete and it met the requirements. We will be asking the board, or the developer will be asking the board to modify that 500-foot block length to 674. And so we state the reasons why we support that. The urban open space, we are interested in seeing the designs of that, make sure that there's no problems with that. The stormwater plan must be approved. We need a financial guarantee for the developer to fund extension of future Road C to the lot line, so the drawing kind of stops the road short. It's got to go to the end of their property. All outstanding transportation comments are addressed and red line comments are addressed. They're minor comments. And so we did recommend that the developer collaborate with the Huntersville Recreation Department to identify potential pedestrian connections to the historic Torrance Lytle School. In talking with the town recreation department, you can see they have a road that connects right here. They have a walkway right in here. But before any changes are talked about, the Parks and Recreation Department is going to want to have a conversation with the community. So it's not just the developer talking to Parks and Recreation, but it's the community getting involved and deciding how they wanted this asset that's now been designated as a historic structure to be served for pedestrians. So that's one of the things that we talked about. And then also considering annexation portions of that's not within the corporate limits of the town. Let me see if I can get to a map. I got a lot of maps here, so forgive me. So here's the map right here. This map happens to show the town limits, and it's the lighter blue, and then everything that's not in the town limits is not shaded. And so this property has some really tiny spots that are in the town limits, but the vast majority is not in the town limits. So we're not mandating the developer annex into the town limits, but that is a recommendation that they consider that. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I am done, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and the developer's here as well to answer questions.
All right, we'll do staff questions first, and then we'll invite Mr. Bowman up for additional commentary. To follow up on some of the public comments, there was a reference to parcel 019-08108. I've identified that as one of the, to the left of the historic property, the northernmost parcel. Are you aware of any issues with deed, title, ownership, et cetera?
I don't have the tax map. Do you have that information, Mr. Bowman? Because I don't have the tax parcel numbers. I would ask maybe Brian if you could look.
According to Polaris, there was a deed on 8/19/21. Is that when Mr. Bowman purchased that?
Yeah, that's from the land swap.
Okay.
That's not really a parcel.
I wrote those
That's not necessarily a parcel number right there. That's right. That's not a parcel number. So
Yeah, that's the number she gave.
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to parcel, it ends in 108. I think. Is that parcel number? One oh eight. Okay, could you check the parcel next to that? It's 108. Okay. So the parcel number that Ms. Nguyen mentioned, and Ms. Nguyen, if I say something wrong, if you would correct me, I'd appreciate it. Let's see here. It's right in this area right here, parcel 108. Is that where you felt that was, Ms. Nguyen?
They squared them, put rectangles
Yeah.
for their lots
Oh.
in a different direction.
Yeah, I got a tax map here. I've got a tax,
Wait, it was right, yeah, there we go.
there we go. That's parcel 108 right there.
The one in between that, Jack?
No, that little one is 109, that's
No,
one.
The slide in between that labeled .82 acres, it was shaded in red. Right, but that's that's the parcel in question.
Oh, I'm sorry, am I,
Go
uh,
one slide, I think, back.
one slide back?
Yeah.
One slide back.
Yeah, there, so where it says
.82
.82 acres, and you see the green
Yes.
horizontal line, 108, or the parcel ending in 108.
Is this big
Big
parcel?
section.
Right, that's the big
below
parcel.
green.
Right. This map, by the way, is to illustrate there was this land swap, right, between the town and the developer. So the town had these two parcels, a little one and then lot 108, and then this one. So the developer got these lots and the town got this triangular shape. I measured it using Polaris, so it's, just slightly off, but it was an even land swap. So that, Ms. Nguyen, I have identified this as the parcel 108. Is that the one that you were feeling was the case?
Yes, the biggest of the two.
Yes, ma'am.
Going south of the 25-foot road.
Yep.
That's been there 100 years. I've seen property deeds dating that road to 1920 for sure.
So that's the parcel in question. So the town had control of that parcel, and then the town swapped that parcel. So I would just have to say to our attorney, I think what Ms. Nguyen's saying is there's no clear title to that property. Is that what?
They cleared, well, by the geospatial mapping, I've been able to document with the state that the 1899 deed had not been sold until Bowman got it. The parcels in that area were divvied up after 1899, but the church got those. The lot where you see the church now and the cemetery on the other side of Valais Village, and then at least that. But it needs investigation instead of being sold. I spoke of this earlier.
So
Ms. Nguyen, I really appreciate your comments, but we are somewhat bound by procedure. I wanted to allow this to be discussed because it is important. But Mr. Glass, if you'd like to come up and add some commentary, and then we'll probably just have to remand this one to further research.
The records that we had showed that the town owned the parcel. As part of the land swap, we did not do a full title search. It just wasn't necessary. It wasn't part of the deal that we made. So, but the records we had, the town owned it. It was part of the land swap, and that's pretty much the information that I have.
Okay, well, thank you for adding that.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Are there records to show how the town obtained the parcel to begin with?
I don't have the folder. I don't have the records on me right now. I'd have to
Well-
look back at it. But yes, I can look back and try and get you that information. But the records that we had, the town owned the property.
So it's,
According to GIS, according to what we looked at, the town owned the property.
and it showed that it was acquired from another entity of some sort, person, whatever.
I'd have to look back at the documents, but
All right, well, it sounds like we don't have the answers here tonight. We'll put a note on the public record that it's highly encouraged that this issue be investigated further. Moving on to some comments about infrastructure. Jack, what happens in an infill project like this where you've got an existing neighborhood that is probably not up to current road widths, sidewalks, et cetera, and a new development infill comes and joins that? What's the process for, well, for lack of better words, when you put a new neighborhood in and there's a sidewalk and then the parcel next to it doesn't have one? What does a town do in those situations?
Right, so the town has lists of communities that are asking for sidewalks. And so the town board prioritizes and then tries to retrofit. Now, that does require willing property owners along the street to dedicate right-of-way necessary, because right now, in this particular case, you got ditch-type streets with no curb and gutter. So the upfit to fix drainage and to make a safe walking place would be to install curb and gutter, collect the stormwater, hopefully have a grass strip that could be planted, and then the sidewalk. That might have to be modified because if property owners don't want to give up much property, then you might have to forego the grass strip. The grass strip is there to give the pedestrian a little separation from the traffic. But when we did the East Huntersville plan, it was recommended that we put sidewalks on Delwood and other streets in this community, in the Pottstown community, for that very reason. You can look at all the connection into Vermillion that comes in. Let me get to a little bit larger map. I think this one, it's a little bit larger, right? So, I mean, you can see when this was a dead-end road, it was really safe to walk down the road because it didn't go anywhere. Now with these homes connected and then these homes connected, this really needs the town's attention to get sidewalks and work with the community to provide a safe walking environment. So it is a function of getting on the sidewalk list and then the town board funding that.
Now, is that a voluntary process, an eminent domain process? Is there compensation? Is it considered fair trade, sidewalk for land? What are the economics of
We
that?
haven't had many of these retrofits. There is one going on, Brian, I think it was a community development grant. Is it, yes, it is on Hambright Road. It's a community development, so it's, and in that case, it's ditch-type streets, and so the town got a grant to install those sidewalks. And it's working with each individual property owner that's affected. And I don't know the exact right-of-way needs for that, but that's the only one I can think of where it was a ditch street, and now it's going to a regular sidewalk that's in there. That's going to be the same thing here. So I don't think the town board would have much interest in condemnation. The board has been very hesitant on doing that. So I think what it's going to take is the town working with the community to find out what you want and what we can accomplish. It might be you have to forego the grass planting strip with the street trees to just have as minimal impact as possible. But that's going to be part of a conversation to figure out what that's going to be. But it's not going to necessarily be your typical 51 or 57-foot wide street that we typically get.
So does it then become more of a collaborative process? But what happens if you've got half the community wants the sidewalk strip and half of them doesn't, or a third want it, a third don't, and a third don't want anything. Is that just in the hands of the politicians to sort out?
Well, it would be, yes. I mean, because local government can use condemnation. So if you have a majority of people wanting it and you have a few holdouts, and that will keep the sidewalk from happening, that's a potential. But that is not a mountain that I've ever seen the town board deal with in my 21 years of being here. So I'm a little bit leery that they would go that route. I think it might be more compromise on the design if the community wants sidewalks, deals with the storm drainage as well.
Okay. Well, thank you for adding that commentary. I think, it's, as developments like this happen, whether here or elsewhere, it's important to balance connectivity with the needs and desires of the community. I'll open it up now to the rest of the board.
Regarding the sidewalks, Jack, has this been attempted with the community before? I mean, if the East Huntersville area plan, boy, I can't talk tonight, that recommended it, and that plan has some age to
It
it.
has a lot of age to it. So the reality of it is, no, it has not been implemented. I honestly do not know where this is on the sidewalk priority. I know that this is part of our Public Works Department has it on the list. This is on the list. I don't know where it is.
Yeah, we still need the annexes area as well, too, that would move it up the CIP list. So it's still hanging down around the middle.
Well, let's just take a look
Isn't-
at the, see, I think what I'm seeing is all of the road is in the town limits. So there are some other roads such as Holbrooks. Yeah, that aren't. So, I mean, as I mentioned, the East Huntersville plan recommended multiple streets have sidewalks, including
Gotcha.
Wood.
It's just challenging with the number of homes out there and the community desire.
Sure.
Like you said, we get some residents are very much for it, others are against it, so it's just a work in progress.
But the reality of it is the town has not had and collaborated with the community in trying to say, what would it look like, and would you be willing to work with us to do that? So I can say that that's been the case. I guess it was maybe 3 years ago, Ms. Nguyen and myself, the mayor, the police chief, we walked the community. And we had that discussion, and it was discussion, the Public Works Director was there, and that we needed the right-of-way, but that was where that conversation ended.
I don't even know if you're allowed to offer it, but if you could put on a scale even of like 1 to 10, just from those conversations, I mean, how well was that received? Is that a question that could?
Are you asking?
Like when you went around and just having those informal conversations?
It was very informal, so we didn't, and Ms. Nguyen can attest to it, we just walked down the street, and it was just like it's been mentioned, it's a real community, and everybody has a lot of history. And so we weren't, we didn't come up and start saying, are you okay with a sidewalk of folks on Delwood Street? So I wouldn't venture to say that. I think from my standpoint, from the town, it's well received. There's strong need for that because the streets now connect. And what was formerly a safe street to walk down when it didn't go anywhere and everybody knew everyone, now that it's connected, it needs to be up there in the priority.
And if this is taking this further off track, by all means, tell me to shelve this. But I know in the past, both for Pottstown and then the name of the neighborhood is escaping me, down by Hambright though, is it Huntington Green? Yeah. So both of those, at least, let me just speak to Pottstown, as I understand it, because of the tax map situation, we went to get, at the time, I believe, block grants and had to do something almost on a door-to-door basis because overall, just looking at tax map, they weren't eligible. Is there something that could be then attained in the same measure so that they are not affected by this tax map situation again as it relates to this infrastructure.
I'm going to try to answer it, and then Brian can save me if I make a mistake. So when you're searching for grants, they use census tract, not tax maps, but census tract boundaries.
Okay.
Okay, so that's what's used. And so, as Ms. Nguyen said, when you take in all the areas that you take in, and then you average out the salaries of everything and what the incomes are, then they don't qualify, is my understanding. And I've not done it. Brian, Bobby with the town manager's office, Bobby Williams, is kind of responsible for that. So I don't know where that is, but that's the issue. Is the census tract is the boundaries that are used. Figure out, what is the income level, and then is there a need, and then would you qualify for federal grants? And so you need to.
That's pretty much it. In the Huntington Green area, we were able to use a specialty program to make them eligible for the CDBG grants. This area, we tried the same thing. It didn't quite hit the marks because it's a little bit different dynamic. Next on the census comes, we're going to explore creating new blocks that will make these areas eligible for grants in the future. But as of right now, that's not the case.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So,
I didn't have a question on this, but I have a question now. The other side of this coin, because we're talking about sidewalks along Delwood Street, right? Delwood? Yeah. The land you'd put the sidewalks on is private property. You'd either have, regardless of any kind of grant you get, you either got to get the permission of the homeowner to put that in, or you have to buy that property from the homeowner. Correct?
So, if you look at this map here, this is the tax map. So the tax map is saying, this is kind of the right-of-way width, and you can see it's a lot wider than this area right here that we were talking about just a moment ago. So, yes, you are correct.
Right.
If it is on private property, yes. But if the right-of-way width is such that you do not have to have that, other than maybe construction easements, because when you build something, you're going to mess up, a couple feet beyond that. So you have to negotiate whether it's a temporary construction easement or whether it's a permanent easement or whether it's even right-of-way. You have to negotiate with the property owner, correct?
Well, then, as I said, that property belongs to the people who live on the street. You're trying to improve the street for the people that live on the street, so it's up to the people on that street, not the city.
Well,
Regardless of any grants you get.
yes, I would concur with that, but the outreach and the community dialogue as to what design to accept has to happen, and that has not happened. And so do we have 9-foot wide or 10-foot wide lanes? Do we have 1.5 foot of curb and gutter or 3 foot of curb and gutter? So that's the point I would make.
And I would say, Chair, I think this is a subject maybe we can approach, but it has no bearing on Valais subdivision.
It's a fair point, Frank. I think it was just important to make sure that the citizens that have voiced their concerns are addressed, at least here, for the wider public to understand and address.
I just wanted to say, I feel like everybody up here is very sensitive to what's happening at Pottstown. And what I don't understand is why there hasn't been a dialogue between the town and the residents about sidewalks. I don't understand. If they're going to go into another tax bracket, if the taxes are going up, if they're feeling pushed out by taxes, I understand that the subdivisions are going to come in, but where is the dialogue with the current residents?
So it's going to be our elected officials that push us in that direction. I will say, in my years of being here, I think there's more probably political will with the town board, with our new town board, than there might have had been in past. I'm not saying it wasn't there, but a more proactive role by the town is what's necessary to create the dialogue. The community is willing to talk, and the North Beck Communities United has been around for a number of years, and so there is the infrastructure there to talk to people, to talk to the community. So,
All right, thank you, Jack. At this point, I'd like to maybe switch topics if there's if there's other items. Frank, did you want to address more on sidewalks?
No, I just wanted to maybe help answer the question. I can't say the conversation that I had because it would be hearsay, I think, here. But I know past board commissioners have, and I'm sure some of the residents there can attest to this in some form. At least one former town commissioner has gone to that community and discussed sidewalks in the past. It did not come to fruition, though.
Thanks for that, Frank. Any other questions for staff, or we'll invite Mr. Bowman up?
Yes, I have a non-sidewalk question for you. Just so that I understand the annex recommendation a little better, that's Charlotte area.
So it's actually Mecklenburg County. So it's not in Charlotte. So anything that's not in our town limits is Mecklenburg County. And so why, and the developer can speak to it, but why we would want it to be into the town limits is trash pickup and police protection. Now, they'll get police protection, but they have to pay a surcharge. So we provide police protection in our areas that are in our jurisdiction, but not in our town limits, but you have a surcharge. And also the same with the fire tax. There's a surcharge for fire. So if it's brought into town limits, then, we do the trash pickup, and there is no surcharge for the police in the fire.
Is there different, not that it necessarily matters to Valais, but is there different ordinances for development as well?
No, so the land development ordinance is applied across our 63 square miles, whether you're in the town limits or whether you're in the extraterritorial jurisdiction. So the development standards don't change.
Okay. And then also on the block length modification, there's nothing, lack for a better word, nothing official that needs to take place. That's just, you're stating that you're comfortable with the recommendation, but there's nothing that has to be voted on or...
Well, the town board would vote on it. So the night that we present this to the town board, they would have to make yes, we're comfortable with you having 679 foot of block length instead of the 500 foot. If they don't approve it, then all of a sudden you have to figure out how to get a street through there. And the problems that I mentioned previously is, if you try to put a street through here, now you're disrupting this street, and you've got swim buffers in this area and significant trees, and you've got a historic property right in here. So there really isn't an opportunity to go this way. There is an opportunity to go this way, but it disrupts. So for these reasons, we believe the town board would approve that. They have in the past.
Staff.
Mr. Bowman, would you care to comment?
I'm just here to answer any questions.
All right, any questions for the developer?
Yeah, I got a couple. First, with respect to the BMP pond,
Kate Bowman, 205 South Church Street.
thanks, Mr. Bowman. The BMP pond that he recommended down here in the corner.
The two of them.
There's two of them. Is there other alternatives for those? Is that?
He's preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
I hate them.
Yeah.
I hate tearing down trees to put in sand filters.
Right.
But Louisa, and if Rusty Brazel was here, they've worked on 20 years to come up with those guidelines.
Right.
And it's a state too,
Okay.
right?
I would like to address this. So when you do development, you have to capture a volume of stormwater that the difference between it's raw land today and now it's going to have houses and driveways and sidewalks and roofs and all that stuff. And you've got to capture that volume, and then you have to release that volume at the same rate as it is today, raw. Okay, so that's a volume thing. The other thing that we do, and we have since 2003, is we have what's called low-impact development, LID, which then not only treats the volume, but then treats the quality of the water to remove the nutrients out of there and the oils that run off as part of that. And so I do understand Mr. Bowman and the development community, but let me just say this. From 2003 to 2017, we've had that standard. And we've also grown probably one of the fastest communities in the state of North Carolina. But I will tell you, the surface water quality in Huntersville has improved over that time. And that's a testament to what we do. And it is expensive, it does take land. But that is, I just wanted to get that out there, that is what we do. And so we have, over the years, modified the standards to try to take a little less land. We now allow sand filters. We before didn't allow that. That becomes a little bit smaller geography, but nonetheless, that is what we do. So again, you have to deal with the volume, and you also have to deal with the treatment of that volume, the water quality that comes off. So I'm stepping away.
So that was almost a rhetorical question, because in Charleston, when we do infill development like this, they oversize boxes, they oversize pipes, they put manhole boxes that actually clean the water before it discharges in the creek, because there's no room, in downtown Charleston for these pumps.
What you may be talking about is underground treatment.
That's correct, yeah.
Right, which is extremely expensive.
Yeah, and that's what I was asking, how.
That's what we're going to be doing at Vermain Village.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so much parking, and it's extremely expensive.
And I guess that was my question, was doing a engineered solution here would be too expensive. You wouldn't entertain it. You'd rather tear down these trees because you already have the tree save that you have.
We have the tree save. We have 41.6% of open space, and we replant any number of trees. If you want to drive through Vermain, you can start counting them. So we planted more than we've torn down.
We haven't seen, just as a follow-up, we haven't seen these underground stormwater solutions except in kind of non-residential development. So they're in the parking lots. The town center even has one of those. In residential subdivisions, nobody's done underground storage yet. They've got the land mass to do it, but it's not to say they wouldn't do it, but it's just, we haven't seen it in the years I've been here.
Yeah. And that 41%, Mr. Bowman, that is just on this northern development lot? You're saving 41%? Okay.
Yeah, everything in green.
Perfect. And then the next question I had was with respect to water and sewer. I assume since this is on the east side of the tracks, it is flowing to the east. Are you going to be able to get permits to build?
No.
Okay.
No, this is Wasack. It's a question whether the pump station is operational that Charlotte Water is supposedly building, or Wasack plant expansion. I would not expect to get an allocation for this property for at least 6 months.
Oh, at least, yeah. I had another question, but I think we kind of killed it with the taxes. But, when we did the tax rate reevaluation, didn't the town go tax neutral? So they didn't actually raise the tax values. The property values rose, and that's what they're seeing as far as their increase in tax value.
Right, so the county did the reassessment, and tax values went up.
Right.
The town board at the time wanted to be what we call revenue neutral, which meant your value went up, but the tax rate went down so that you
paid the same amount, essentially.
Yes, you can say that across an
do.
entire town, but there will be some people, some
People that pay a little more, some people that
But
pay.
overall, the town went revenue neutral.
Right, yeah, that's what I heard. So also, I want to just follow up, like, this development, even if it doesn't get built, these property values are still going to continue to go up because it's Huntersville and there's not that many places available and people are going to pay more and they look at resale and all that, correct?
I can't speak to taxes. I
Yeah.
did go out and take pictures of 7 new homes that have gone up. I have nothing to do with in the last 6 months. We did put 7 homes up on Holbrook Road, but there's developing happening in the neighborhood regardless of what I'm doing.
Okay. 10-4, that's it.
Mr. Bowman, can you address the request from staff about annexation?
We're going to annex. We have had a history of annexing every project in Huntersville we ever done. In fact, I don't think we've ever done a project in any city that we hadn't annexed.
Okay.
So we're on board.
In regards to the eastern part of the development, looks like 2 stubs. What's the purpose of the stub that's on here pointed west that looks like it's going directly into a pond?
That's a turnaround.
Turnaround.
Garbage. That doesn't need to be there if there was ever a connection to the remainder of the property.
I can understand the one that's going south, but there's,
That's where the garbage truck will turn around.
okay.
Almost caught one of them once. All right, I sent out an email today to the members of the board and to Mr. Semino to pass on to Mr. Bowman because I didn't feel like I should directly contact you with it. But it has to do with, and if Jack would put that, if you put the map up you had a little while ago that showed the swap properties, I think that might do the best way to describe where this piece of land is. Right, you had it. That street right there, and I think it's, in the staff report, it's called a cart trail, and, I mean, if I had to guess what it was, it's access to landlocked land in the back. But doing a Polaris search on that piece of property, I can't find an owner. I checked, not that I am anywhere a professional deed searcher, but I went in to Polaris and checked deeds for the properties that run along and connect to that cart trail, and I couldn't find any easements that were allowed or anything about that piece of property. So right now, and I'm going to dub these pieces, if nobody else has a name for them, as ghost parcels, so, because it doesn't have a number. But, so my question is, no one owns that property. It doesn't belong to the town. And I would just give you an opportunity. I'm kind of concerned that we have a piece of land that we've given permission to build a road in, and we really don't know who really owns it.
Right. We've gone back to a 69 survey, and up to this point, I'm now pushing my attorney. He's gone back to 1958, showing it as a public right-of-way, so we have to dig back further than that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to offer this to the town for just another access point. If it's determined we can't build the road, we just won't build the road because we have enough access points for fire. We just see it's a benefit to the community and to the town that we carry all of our 1,500 linear feet of sidewalk that we're building that go ahead and connects to Delwood. So we're going to research that back before we get to town board and see what records are before 1958. But as I told Jack earlier, I know from my first wife's family that they went to Mr. Pope up in Mooresville as a farm family, and he was the closest attorney in Huntersville for probably 40 or 50 years, and very rarely did they go into Charlotte. So a lot of the, when deeds and estates are done, they're not really done correctly. And we've run into this several times all over Vermillion, not just on Delwood, on Hill Street, any number of places. So the records are kind of sparse. So we'll get to the bottom of it. And then again, the town, if they really want the road, could go ahead and condemn the road. Since nobody owns it, there shouldn't be any opposition if they want the road. But we can do the subdivision without the road.
And I would just point out that there's another small ghost parcel. That's the, further down the street, the rectangular strip that leads into the Delwood Community Center. That's also a ghost parcel. There's no listing of anybody that owns it. And based on what I heard Ms. Lynn say.
I'm not sure I understand could you describe?
Right here, right there. The driveway.
We're talking about the driveway that serves, so that's the driveway that serves the community center.
All right, when I clicked on it in parcel, I got the same sort of information as I
That
did
may
the
be
other.
on the deed that the Huntersville Community Association deeded when they deeded the Rosenwald School to the town of Huntersville. So I can give the town attorney staff, they can, I have a copy of that deed with me.
Well, I'm just pointing out that there's another there.
Probably on that deed.
So this leads me back to my discussion earlier when we were talking about the road and buffers. The two potential historical homes that are out on Delwood, we're going to put a road between them with no buffers, and we don't own the land. And I mean, I'm sure that I've only been here about 4 or 5 years, Jack, so I'm sure you've seen this before, but I haven't. And that's why I have these questions, because we're requiring a buffer down at the at the church on the east end, but we're not requiring buffers here on this street next to those homes.
Right, because this is a right-of-way. I mean, you gotta look at it, it's serving property back there. So this is what we do. That is exactly why we talked to the Landmarks Commission and said, here's the plan. We wanted input, and you saw, it's in your agenda packet, the Historic Landmarks Commission did not see an adverse impact of the subdivision to those homes. So I can appreciate the comment, but that's my response to you.
Well, I mean, even if for some reason this road weren't built, I think the road should still be there, and probably an emergency access, but that's another option that may or may not come to fruition. That's all I have, Mr. Bowman. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for the applicant or staff before moving forward? All right, do we have a motion? Go for it.
Jack, I'm sorry. I had one last question. In the staff plan, you mentioned something about, I'm not going to find it quickly, but stormwater plan approval, is that still outstanding?
Right, so what
Okay.
happens at this level is they do a concept plan, and so conceptually, the stormwater ponds are gonna work. If the subdivision sketch plan is approved by our town board, then they go to full engineering drawings, the preliminary plan, and that's when the detail will be worked out. And it may be that you might have to lose a home or two because of stormwater issues, but, so the answer is yes, that's conceptually they're there, but the final design doesn't happen until after the sketch plan is approved, and then they go into full engineering drawings.
Do we have a motion? Anyone?
I can do a motion. In considering the application for the Valais subdivision sketch plan, the planning board finds the application to be complete. We find the application complies with all of the applicable requirements of Section 6.2 of the Town of Huntersville subdivision ordinance. These findings of compliance are supported by policies EOS 8.3, EOS 10, LU 2.1, LU 7.1, LU 11.1, T 3.1, and T 5.1 of the Huntersville Community 2040 Plan. Further, we also find the application to be in compliance with the directives of the East Huntersville Area Development Plan. This compliance is dependent upon the following items, though. Urban space designs are added to the plans to ensure compliance, stormwater plan approval, and third, secure a financial guarantee from the developer to fund the future extension of Road C to the lot line. The planning board recommends approval of the sketch plan application with the following recommendations also. Collaborate with the Huntersville Parks and Recreation staff to identify potential pedestrian connections to the Torrance-Lytle Community Center and consider annexing the additional portions of the development.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Greg, any additional comments?
No, I don't believe so.
Scott, anything to add?
I think we've already discussed, again, this is somewhat of a quasi-judicial hearing for us. We've got to just rule on the facts that are presented to us, and the modifications, I think, are reasonable. Again, this block length and some of the other, we see it, we're going to see it more often as, as we continue to grow, we'll have these challenging sites that developers have to turn to, and we're going to have to show some flexibility in what we approve, and I think the flexibility we're looking at here is reasonable.
Anyone else? Jeff?
Question for Mr. Glass, actually. So given the quasi-judicial nature of this, a lot of the public comments would be of more of the conjecture type versus the typical facts that we see. But some of it was indeed fact. My question is from a legal perspective, in the town's eyes, is the comment that was brought up regarding parcel ending in 108, can I consider that to be relevant testimony that needs to be explored?
So while this is a quasi-judicial, or will be a quasi-judicial hearing in front of the town board, in front of the planning board, this is not a public hearing, this is not a quasi-judicial hearing, you guys are only giving an advisory recommendation. So a sketch plan is quasi-judicial, but only in front of the town board. As Jack was saying, we try to somewhat mimic that best we can, just so you guys can give the best recommendation possible. But any public comments, they were not sworn, so they are not parties, so they know that those public comments are not considered evidence for this situation, because this isn't technically even a quasi-judicial hearing, because this is only advisory.
I guess
So
I didn't think of that part in terms
I
of
hope that
swearing in
helps.
and so forth. Thank you. Seems we're in discussion on the motion, I would say I was fully prepared to approve this. I'm torn as to whether I can now request even just to punt it to have that parcel research further. Because I feel the plan itself, aside from that, hits every mark that it's supposed to for plan approval.
We can make it as another recommendation.
Consider an amendment to the motion that it's all contingent on that parcel actually belonging to the town?
But, all right, so question again, Jacob. Given this is not like a rezoning where we can throw in our own modifications, this typically is a yes or no scenario on the sketch plan, or sketch plan reviews. Can we do that or no? I don't.
I'll note that whether the town had owned it or not is not a criteria for this subdivision. And in the eyes of the town right now, because for the subdivision, for the sketch plan, there are 18 criteria, and whether it meets all of those criteria, that's the point of what you're looking at. And from the eyes of the town, according to the county, right now, Valais, Bowman, the applicant owns that parcel. And that's how the town, if somebody wanted to bring a civil action to take it to the court about who owns the property, they could do that. But in the eyes of the town, the applicant owns the property, and that's that.
Frank, did you have something?
No.
Any other comments for discussion?
I just want to clarify what he just said. So we do not have any power to change anything based on ownership, correct? And the only way that could be affected at all is if someone brought a lawsuit. Okay, thank you.
Having said that, you are here to give a recommendation, best recommendation to the town board. So if there is concern about that parcel, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, it'd still be fair game if the planning board made a recommendation that the ownership of that parcel be checked further? Is that fair for them to?
So because this is only an advisory recommendation, yes, I suppose you could make a comment for the town board to look into it further. And then if the town board wished, I suppose maybe they could, punt it for a little while to look into it further to see if that's something that they wanted to look into. But I guess my point about it being quasi-judicial in nature, once they get to that point, you can only look at the criteria that is set out in the ordinance. That's what we have to do. So, but I mean, I suppose if they did want to possibly, make it wait another month or something before deciding, yes, they might. That is kind of the point of the advisory recommendation. You're supposed to give your recommendation on what you think.
In that case, I will make a amendment to the motion that, as part of our recommendation to approve, that an enhanced entitled search, an enhanced title search be done to ascertain the validity of the claim on that parcel since it is disputed. Do you accept the amendment?
Second.
Would you accept it?
Second and accept it.
You accept it, and then he's,
Second.
very good. Any other comments? Very good. Motion to approve the motion as made. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 8-1. Thank you, everyone. Up next,
I do want to mention that, if I can, that the town board will be hearing this case for on April the 18th. So Monday, April the 18th at 6 PM here at Huntersville Town Hall will be the final action on this case.
if I can also add, if it would please be noted specifically on the record in the minutes, that extensive discussions were had involving tying into the community sidewalks, and that this board has shown an interest in making sure those desires are heard. All right, moving on to the next item, item B, petition R2117, request by HFH Partners. Actually, before that, yes, someone else has to do it.
I'd like to make a motion to recuse Jay from this discussion.
Second that.
All in favor? We'll call you back.
Don't leave.
All right.
You may want to already, though. Who knows?
Now we can address petition R21-17 from HFH Partners.
Good evening, Brian Richards for the planning staff. At this time, I'd like to enter my staff report to the record. Yeah, he can stay since he's the applicant.
Okay, that's
Little twist, first time for everything.
I was thinking the other way.
Yep, nope, we're good. I'll try to be brief this evening. This is a rezoning request along Gilead Road to rezone roughly 3.8 acres from neighborhood residential to TND conditional district. Here's a quick overview aerial as the site existed about last year. Some of the homes have been removed due to some deterioration. Here is the proposed site plan. Like I said, it's 3.8 acres. Currently, the use is single-family homes. The proposed use is for up to 19,000 square feet of commercial and 29 townhomes. The building types will be highway commercial and attached housing units for a density of 7.6 units per acre. At the public hearing, this was the tree survey that was presented. Since then, an arborist has gone out and determined a number of these trees are in poor health, and we agree that they should be removed from the tree survey. So here is a revised tree survey as of yesterday. There are 10 specimen trees on the site now. 2 will be saved, 3 are going to be required. The applicant is offering to mitigate. At this point in time, we're going to look at planting on site as well as some fee in lieu, so we'll have to work through that when we get to the construction plans to see where is appropriate locations for these extra trees. They are requesting 4 modifications. The first being a buffer yard modification. They are asking to reduce the 20-foot required buffer along the rear property and the eastern property adjacent to the school. There is, and along to the eastern side, they're offering a privacy fence as well as extra evergreens. That is to screen the loading zone that is at the school. Staff is in support of this modification. The second modification is for a rear setback. Article 8.1 allows us to use site-specific development plans as long for modifications and reductions in setbacks as long as public safety is still maintained. And in this case, they'll have full access for fire trucks, service delivery, et cetera. Staff is in support of that modification as well. The third modification is for building height. The applicant is requesting to increase the building height by 3 feet. We are in support of this as well as it's in keeping with the requirements of the ordinance, and allows them to have some additional architectural interest along Gilead Road. The fourth modification is the internal landscaping modification. When we develop sites, we look for yard trees to be planted. This is one of the first true infill projects we've got in town. When this ordinance was written a number of years ago, we required lots less than 10,000 square feet to have 1 front yard tree as one rear yard tree. These lots that they're proposing are very small, between 1,000 and 2,700 square feet. go ahead and put a townhome on there. Not a lot of room left for trees. We are utilizing some of the existing street trees and landscape trees in the project here to help mitigate that. We're continuing to work with the applicant to see where those are going to end up being. We won't be able to get exact locations. Right now, we're still neutral on this. We're working through, like I said, with the applicant to find out what the best plan of attack is to mitigate these trees. In the end, we're right now, it's going to be planting on-site as well as possible some mitigation as well. We've identified roughly 35 locations for trees to go, and the requirement would be, at 29 lots, it would be 58 trees. So we've got to find some space for about 20 more trees, and they may end up having to just pay into the tree fund to take care of that. So we're neutral on this modification request right now, but we're still working with the applicant to get that solved. Here are some elevations. This is the proposed commercial building along Gilead Road. The applicants have some much cooler graphics later on than mine. Here are the proposed townhomes along Gilead Road as well as on the urban open space. As you can see, the plan fits right in between our two activity centers and mixed-use nodes, and so this would be considered in the town core. The town core does encourage a mixture of uses as well as utilization of townhomes. So you can see this is consistent with the 2040 plan. This is located in Tier 2 of the community plan, which also supports a mixture of uses and housing types. A long list of supports from the 2040 plan. I will not bore you with all of them, but they're there in your staff report. Also prudent to this project is the 2006 downtown plan, which we are currently updating now. But if we go back to 2006, it's envisioned Gilead Road as a 80-foot right-of-way with one row of parking and buried utilities. We are moving forward with our CIP to get those utilities buried in about 24 or 25. There is an existing STIP project that is not funded, or it's paused on funding, that potentially could have a larger right-of-way, but Gilead Road is classified as a minor thoroughfare, so the most that we can require due to our zoning ordinance is 70 feet, but the applicant is offering 80, and staff is in agreement that that's a good number for us to use, is that 80 feet. And overall, we are in support of this project, given the fact that we will continue to work with the applicant until the hearing in a couple weeks, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have, as well as the applicant.
I don't have questions, I have a motion, but we'll hear from the applicant.
Sounds good. Jay? Or Brian?
Yes.
Jay Henson, 121 Gilead Road. Also Brian Hines.
Brian Hines, 121 Gilead Road. Good to see you all.
And we also have, if you have questions, Meeting Street Homes is going to be the townhome builder. They're with us today as well. So if you have specific questions on the townhomes, we can have them come up and speak as well. Basically, briefly, the townhomes on Gilead Road sort of oriented to have that frontage. Behind the townhomes on Gilead Road, we have some cottage-style townhomes where they're, sort of a lower profile. The elevation is not, like they would be on Gilead Road. They have a little bit more of a, cottage style. They're all attached. They front the large open green there so that, in our ordinance where you can either front a public road or an open green, we're gonna front those on the open space. The other commercial building along Gilead Road, sort of is, right now it's a flex commercial 2-story building that, we hope to get, some kind of, restaurant user, et cetera, in there. There's an image of sort of, and one other thing didn't mention is the yellow house that everybody calls it the yellow house. It's sort of the end of the property. That's going to remain, and hopefully to turn that into some type of vibrant community space as well. And we are going to try to save. There's a large tree right off the driveway right there. We're going to save that tree and sort of incorporate it into the plaza.
Does this tear down the garage to that house?
No. It's hard to see. You got to really look close, but it's in there.
You can kind of see the garage door behind the little small people.
Okay.
Well, this is one of the areas that we're really trying to put a big focal point on because the outdoor entertainment, the relationship between the new structure, the new commercial building, and the yellow house, which we're really working with local type commercial, restaurants, tap rooms, those kind of things, trying to bring something that can really work well together on this large, it's about 5,000 square feet of open space right out here. There's going to be tree plantings, but if we put those on the visual, then it kind of blur out what we're trying to show here. So.
Yeah, and one other cool feature, I think, on this is the new greenway in the back. We're going to show, connection through our site so that, our hope is to get an easement through CMS to be able to tie back into that and be able to access it that way. I think that'd be really strong.
How realistic is that?
Well, we've had very high-level dialogue with Mecklenburg County. So the process is Mecklenburg County, CMS has to agree first and foremost. Mecklenburg County has to be willing to allow that as well, connection to the Greenway. And Huntersville also has to partner and say, yes, we would like that connection as well. So I know when I was on the board, it took the town about 3 years to get the easement from CMS to connect from Sherwood back to Commerce Center. So this will not, our project will be completed for probably many years before that connection were to happen. But we're reserving it for it to go there as part of our project, being proactive.
It's an elevation of the units along Gilead Road. There's another shot, of the three buildings there. Then in the courtyard area, sort of a different style, a little bit more of a cottage style, with the colors. We'll have, nice landscaping. We're going to have a lot of trees in this area. We didn't want to show them again because it would sort of distort, the image of the units. One other quick thing, if you can go to that site plan, Brian, all the way back to the beginning. We are going to do something a little different here with the stormwater. Being an urban infill site, it was just very difficult to incorporate a pond. So we're going to go with, instead of an underground system, a traditional underground system, we're going to look at pervious pavers and have the actual storage and the water quality volume below the pavers within the stone base. So the nice thing about that is we do infiltration tests all around the site, and we know that the soil will accept that, so it'll perk, and we can store the water directly into, there's no catch basins or pipes, directly into the pavement. Goes right into the pavement at the source. The groundwater will get put back right into the source.
Jay, where is that on the? Where are you putting these pavers?
It would be the parking lot in the alley, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
What is that like versus asphalt? What's the driver's experience, the foot experience?
I mean, it's as far as the strength or how smooth it is, or.
I guess that's a tough question. What's the texture? What's the?
Oh no, I mean it's just like a brick paver. I mean it's or a concrete paver.
Oh, so just little interlocking.
Yeah, I mean the joints are very small, and it has stone instead of sand, and it has a loose stone base below it, so it penetrates immediately into the base.
Yeah. So Abe is with Meeting Street Homes. I'll let him address that. They're doing a project right now in Davidson that has the system.
It's Abe Lyman. I live on 6020 Stevens Road in Huntersville. We're using this paver system, and we were very excited when they said that they were willing to do something like this. We have a community, an English village right off the Lake Cornelius, and we used the roadway in the alley with this pervious pavers, and it has worked fantastically. And it has held up to our surprise. We were very worried about it during construction, but we are building the last 3 units there, and it has held up better than any street that we've used. Curbs, there's no curb, there's no gutter, so it's pretty. I mean, it sets something apart than just having some pavement and curb and gutter and concrete. So they should be, I mean, it's really a pretty special thing to have this kind of thing, and it works really well.
So maybe an unrelated question, but why isn't it everywhere? Is it more expensive?
It's more expensive.
But it works better on an infill site where you have, you can't get depth sometimes on a real flat site, or, you just don't have the area to carve out, for a pond or something like that.
Motion? To the yellow house. I'm confused, is that part of your property?
Yes.
It's already commercial, it's not literally a house,
It is a house and there is a resident there now.
Oh, but they'll be okay with this, or they're leaving, or?
No, we own the property now.
Okay.
They're leasing that.
We have a tenant.
Oh, okay. But then it's going to be turned into commercial and no more tenant?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
Chair, I have a motion.
Quick question on the greenway. I just want to clarify, you guys are just doing the sidewalk to your property limits, right? That's all you're building, and then north of that would be on the town once the agreement was made with the county?
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll try to push that, because that's, we would really like to see that happen.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Frank has a motion if there's no other questions. Not trying to crowd that out, but
No, if there's questions, that's, fine.
take it away, Frank.
The planning board recommends approval of the proposed rezoning of petition R21-17 Gilead Road mixed use from neighborhood residential NR to traditional neighborhood development urban conditional district TND-U-CD. The planning board finds that the rezoning is consistent with Huntersville zoning ordinance articles 11.4.7D, 11.4.7E, and Huntersville 2040 community plan policies LU 2.1, LU 5.1, LU 5.3, LU 6.2, LU 6.3, LU 7.1, LU 8.1, LU 8.2, EV 2.3, DT 11.1, and DT 11.1. That's a mistake. The last, I wrote that twice. I need to get the correct one at the bottom. 11 point, what's up here?
DT 1.3.
DT one, yeah, okay. Starting with EV 2.3 again. EV 2.3, DT 1.3, and DT 11.1. I continue. It is reasonable in the public interest to amend the zoning ordinance because the rezoning is consistent with the envisioned uses and development patterns set forth in the 2040 Community Plan and the 2006 Downtown Master Plan. The Planning Board further recommends approval of modification number 1, buffer yard, modification number 2, rear setback, and modification number 3, building height, all of which are in keeping with the spirit of the ordinance and therefore supported. Although the Planning Board is also inclined to recommend approval of modification number 4, front and rear yard trees, the Planning Board supports staff's request to continue discussions to explore options or mitigation. Further, this recommendation for approval is contingent upon the applicant addressing all outstanding staff issues. The end.
I'll second that.
Frank, any other comments?
No, I did, if you read the neighborhood minutes, and so I did go to that. I didn't talk there. I went to listen to what locals have to say that live downtown, and everybody there liked it. I don't see anything wrong with this. I haven't heard anything wrong or seen anything wrong with this development, which is kind of neat in itself when you're talking about developing downtown. That's all.
Yeah, I would just say the project itself, to me, it's a welcome mix of what's likely to be retail, commercial, townhomes. The latter, at least to me, is important for downtown because it represents home ownership in some fashion. So, as I have stated in the past, townhomes, condos, if you can squeeze some single-family homes, I'd always prefer that versus apartments. And then really, if you look at the applicants and they've shown their desire to try and preserve some of Huntersville's history already by restoring their office that they're in now, 121 Gilead, and then by looking to incorporate 208 Gilead into this as well. Both of those apparently have some noted history with the Blythe family. And so I think overall, I'm excited to see it, so.
I love this. I think it's a really neat concept. I love the pavers. And I hope that if we can get some rooftop, well, we're going to be discussing that. I would love to see that put in there and use that as some green space as well for the tree issue.
Jeff and Trina took my notes, obviously. You guys read my notes. I just wanted.
You were looking that way, and I'm like, oh, that's good.
I just wanted to pile on it and really just say, we all want these mixed-use concepts, and typically we see a mixed-use concept where there's retail on the bottom and residential above, which is just, it's design standards, I get it, but this is unique in the sense that it is a mixed use that is two different housing types, a new building, and the fact that, Huntersville doesn't have too many structures out there that we can, rely on and save, and the fact that these guys are going to the effort to save an old house. And I use a great example of just down the street here, the Crafty Beer guys. I mean, what a cool atmosphere to go into an old house that the floors creak, and it's just, so again, hats off to you guys. I'll be in support of it.
Anyone else? It's a great project. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Keep it up.
Make a
Mr.
motion to return Jay Henson to the planning board.
Second that.
All in favor? Come on back, Jay. Say what? Yes. So with the agenda change, we are moving to what used to be item E. It is the Hill Street Subdivision Phase 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to enter the staff report into the record. This is the Hill Street Phase 3 sketch plan. I'm going to quickly go through the essential elements. You can see here that this is a neighborhood residential zoning base with a T&D overlay. This area is essentially part of the original embrace of Vermillion, if you will. And you can see the zoning pattern around it. Located, Hill Street intersects with Huntersville Concord Road. And it will be across from what will be the Vermillion Village project there, the large red area. So the red square represents the Phase 3 property. You can see in your staff that this is 0.4 acres. It's fairly small. You can see the lot pattern in Vermillion that exists today. You can see that there are nothing but townhomes in this particular area, and the proposal that you're going to see in just a minute is going to be extremely similar to what is already out there. I'm just adding in here for reference. You can see that the property just immediately to what would be the south and east, that is Phase 2, and it is going to be very similar to what I'm about to show you. And then, of course, you can see Phase 1, which has about 11 years of history in it, and what that became. I will point out that Windmile Lane is a street, and it will wrap around. You'll see that in a minute. Alley May, of course, context clues will tell you that's an alley. Here's a context map. You can see there in the white. I can't point to it that you'll see it, but you can see the white block there, and then the Vermillion Village across the street, and the existing larger Vermillion project, as it were. Also, pay close attention to the large green swath to the southwest of this particular area. That is the creek, and I'll come back to that on a couple of points. So here you see the site plan, and again, in the red box, these are the 6 townhome lots that we're talking about. So very, very simple. You have a private alley access drive that's going to go in between all 6. There is no turnaround. The length does not require it. However, I will point out the trash collection will be out at the street. The trash will not go down, the trash vehicle will not go down that alley. That was just a reference to the second project. If you look on the bottom, this is located in the mixed-use center node. You see the red star up at the top there from the 2040 plan. I can rattle off all of the land use consistency elements if you'd like me to, but they're all there and in your staff report, and we can touch on any of those that you'd like. If you so desire, we have a report from CMS that you're familiar with. I will point out very quickly, excuse me, never mind, that was a Valais comment. Don't need to go with that. What this boils down to is we find this application complete. This subdivision would satisfy all of the requirements and as outlined in parts 2 through 4 of this report. However, we have 3 additional elements, and that would be that the urban open space greenway is coordinated in Mecklenburg County. Let me talk about that very quickly. I'm going to go back. And in the area to the southwest of the red box, you see it labeled urban open space. Currently, there is a park that is located there, and it's completely compliant, and those 3 townhome units would face that park. However, Mr. Bowman and the development group have decided that there is a greenway that's going to come up out of the creek. It's going to go along Huntersville Concord Road to Hill Street, and then it will cross Huntersville Concord Road at that point, which is an intersection that's being created by the Vermilion Village project. And so to facilitate that, Mr. Bowman would rather put the greenway along Huntersville Concord Road and then through that urban open space place and set up for the eventual county town project that will take the greenway through the larger part of Vermilion. So what does that all boil down to? It basically means that a greenway area being built by Mr. Bowman as a natural surface path at this stage would satisfy the frontage requirement for those 3 townhomes, and a park would satisfy the frontage requirements. So staff is comfortable either way. Mr. Bowman is indicating that he would prefer to go the greenway route, and we're trying to get input from the county on this. And so we hope to have that plan by the time the quasi-hearing is held in front of the town board. But if it is not, then we'll have to craft a fund note that gives that A-B scenario. Any questions on that, about what's contemplated in that? Basically, what you can imagine is to get up out of the creek, the greenway's got to do some cutbacks, got to maintain 3% average grade, although you can do small sections of 8%. But still, getting up with that topography, it's going to take a good bit of land. So this will be what the asset that this project will bring to that project. So it'll further the connection from Vermilion into downtown. So going back to the motion, the second, of course, is the stormwater concept plan would be approved. Again, there are some minor comments that probably still need to be addressed. I will point out, though, that the age of the original master plan for Vermilion and the zoning that is there, water quality is not required. They will have to have the retention. All of the outstanding red line comments would be addressed as per usual, and recommendation is for approval as presented. Any questions of myself or the applicant?
I just was wondering, what is it going to look like? Go back to that plan view
Okay, at the
along
end.
Huntersville Concord. Like, you're driving down Huntersville Concord, you look to the right. Are there trees there? You know, when you come through there with the greenway?
There was going to, I'll let Mr. Bowman elaborate, but there was going to be a buffer there, but that would probably be modified to put the greenway in, and it will probably, meander as much as possible. And then you got quite a bit of width there, and Mr. Bowman would probably tell you exactly how wide. And then, hopefully the street side of those townhomes will be enhanced as well to make that experience not just an ignored side, if you will.
Yes.
And the buildings will be partially below grade. That's extremely low there. And have found it almost impossible to work with Mecklenburg County, to be quite frank. So we know that if we design something, they might come back in and say, no, we want it this way. So we'll give them the opportunity to say, how do you want the greenway to go from what we've already donated to that spot, and let them tell us how they want it. Then we can go back and landscape around it.
Okay.
But it really drops off.
Yeah.
That's where all the garbage is thrown. You see me out there picking up, so.
One of your notes said the willingness to serve letter was outstanding.
Yeah, that's in the same bucket. I'll let, if you'd like Mr. Bowman to elaborate.
I just want to know if it's still
They
out.
don't have it in hand and they
Okay.
won't have it, but it's contingent and they won't get any permits until they do.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion when we're ready.
Motion right here.
Let's go do it.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Do it. I take that back.
Motion for Hill Street Subdivision Phase 3 sketch plan, and considering the Hill Street Subdivision Phase 3 sketch plan, planning board finds the application is complete. The Hill Street Subdivision Phase 3 sketch plan complies with all applicable requirements and is supported by the findings of fact outlined in Part 2-4 of the staff report. The planning board recommends approval of the proposed subdivision sketch plan with the condition: number 1, urban open space greenway is coordinated with Mecklenburg County. Number 2, stormwater plan is approved at the engineering preliminary plan And number 3, that all other minor site plan red line comments are addressed.
I'll second that.
Any other comments? We usually let the motioner lead off.
I do not.
Fair enough. Jeff?
The only one I have is, this is clearly a natural extension of what's already there. So absolutely makes sense, finish it out.
Valid motion to support. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thanks, David. Thanks, Nate. All right, up next, we're back to the original item C, the text amendment portion of our evening. Petition TA 22-01 from the Town Planning Department.
Right, there we are. Hey, it's good to see you all tonight. I will be presenting TA 2201 and would like to enter my staff report into the record. TA 2201 will update the zoning ordinance to match 160D's language on the downzoning of property. Local governments had until July 1st, 2021 to adopt ordinance amendments to comply with Chapter 160D. At that date, the rules of Chapter 160D apply whether or not the local ordinance has been updated. A text amendment approved in June 2021 encompassed the majority of amendments required to comply with 160D. It did not include the updated language on the downzoning of property, so town attorneys worked with staff to prepare the text amendment. The Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board recommended approval of TA 22-01 on January 6th. The public hearing was held March 7th, and no one from the public commented. Planning staff recommends approval of the proposed text amendment. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
I have a question. If you look at Section 2, which is Article 11.4.9, when development not begun within 2 years, that section doesn't tell you, let me get the right word. Section 2 does not explain how to initiate rezoning of an approved petition that has not begun within 2 years. It just states the planning board can't do it. However, 160-601D does. It says the town board can initiate. This was explained in the definition, but not the ordinance section that explained the procedure. So it doesn't state that you can initiate a rezoning of a piece of property, even if it does downside, because the town board can do it. But it doesn't say that in this paragraph. I think that should be added in some way.
I'm going to have to defer that because I honestly didn't understand.
Yeah, I would defer to Jacob as if that language should be added. Yeah.
So we're comfortable with this language? This language has been in place since 1996. There's really only been one conditional rezoning that progressed on a number of years. That was at Huntersville East, which was NC 73 and Davidson Concord connection. And that was conditionally rezoned, and I apologize, I don't have the years that it was approved, but they were waiting on sewer. They got their subdivision approved, but they were waiting on sewer. So every couple of years, they would come back to us, and we would tell the town board and the planning board, well, this is where they're at. And now it's under construction, as you are aware of, but that's the only one that's happened. So when there is this 2-year time lapse, we can initiate the zoning on that. So we're comfortable with it. I can appreciate Frank's concern. So I would just leave it at that.
Sorry, Jack. I'm still not. So our current ordinance says 3 years, right? And this text amendment will cut it back to 2. Is that to be in compliance with 160?
Yeah, so that's correct. So 160D specifically says your vesting period is for a 2-year time period. We used to be 3, and we moved everything back to 2 years to coincide with it. Now, this section, we need to bring it back to coincide with the 160D 2-year time limit.
My preference would be, I think, 3 years is more reasonable, but again, if we're simply complying with NCGS, right?
Precisely right. We were comfortable from the 90s up till the 160D changes with 3 years, and then we dialed everything back to what the statute said.
If you got a motion, you go ahead and read it. I don't have to read them. I got one for every one of them. So I like to share.
Frank was in the Boy Scouts, in case y'all weren't aware.
Yeah, I always started the fires.
In considering the proposed amendment TA 22-01, the planning board recommends approval based on the amendment being consistent with all policies of the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan, as the amendment is necessary to comply with state legislature. It is reasonable and in the public interest to amend the zoning ordinance because it is necessary to coordinate the Huntersville zoning ordinance to comply with state legislature. The end.
Second.
I heard Scott first. Any
No comments.
comments? Valid motion, all in favor? Opposed, none, motion passes. Thank you. My tongue tangled there. All right, up next, well, I have to say, I'm majorly misestimating the amount of time I thought we were going to be here tonight. Hopefully I didn't claim victory too soon. Petition TA 21, let's see, is that where we're at, 15? Yes, TA 21-15 regarding rooftop amenity spaces.
Hey, I'm going to be presenting this one as well and would like to enter my staff report into the record. So the purpose of this amendment is to allow and place standards for rooftop amenity spaces to exceed the maximum building height. I want to be clear that this text amendment would only set regulations for rooftop amenity spaces that exceed the maximum building height. It would not impose regulations on rooftop amenity spaces that are below the maximum building height. A little bit of background on what prompted the text. Yes, no, you're fine. So this text amendment would only set regulations for rooftop amenity spaces that exceed the maximum building height. It would not impose these regulations on rooftop amenity spaces that are below the maximum building height. Correct. So rooftop spaces, I wouldn't even say just rooftop amenity, but any kind of rooftop space, a commercial bar top kind of space that is below the maximum building height is not subject to these standards. They would just be subject to the current zoning ordinance standards. All right, so a little bit of background on what prompted the text amendment. The North State Development next to Town Center wants to add a 750 square foot rooftop amenity space on top of a mixed-use building that is already proposed at the maximum building height. Currently, a rooftop amenity space for the building would not be permitted because it would increase the building height past the allowed maximum height. And so if you see on your screen, the approved rezoning height is 52.5 feet, and currently the North State is proposing their building at that height. And then you can see under potential rooftop amenity what it would look like with an approximately 11-foot tall rooftop amenity added onto that 52.5 feet. So staff is proposing that rooftop amenity spaces be allowed to exceed the maximum building height on mixed-use and apartment building types. Shown are the height limits for these building types. And of course, conditional rezonings can increase the allowed maximum building height. The normal building height for an apartment building type is going to be 36, and then for a shop front or mixed use, which is what the North State Development next to Town Center is 48 maximum. Again, their conditional rezoning allowed them to go up to 52.5. So here is where you can see TA 2115 would apply if it was approved. And currently, due to Article 8.7, a development seeking to provide a rooftop amenity space would have to fit that rooftop amenity space within the allowed maximum building height. And you can also see here where we are proposing to add 8.7.5 rooftop amenity spaces and exceedance of maximum building height. So staff started to analyze how other communities regulated building height for rooftop amenity spaces. Research was conducted regarding these spaces and zoning ordinance language on access, building height, location, size, setbacks, etc. Several North Carolina municipalities were looked at, as well as other municipalities outside of North Carolina. Shown here is the language added to Article 8.7 as subsection 8.7.5. Here is the language under Article 7 detailing the requirements for a rooftop amenity space to count as open space. Only 1,500 square feet of a rooftop amenity space can count towards urban open space, and this space must be accessible to everyone in the development to count as open space. The Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board did not recommend approval of the proposed text amendment on January 6, 2022. The public hearing was held on March 7, 2022. One comment from the public was made that was not in favor of the text amendment due to concern of adequate protection of surrounding properties. Several commissioners made comments that this text amendment made them uncomfortable because of potential impacts to neighboring properties and its association with the North State project in downtown Huntersville. Planning staff recommends approval of the text amendment application as proposed. Thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Can you go back one slide? So did I understand that 1,500 square foot, is that, it says it can be used for urban open space, but is that also the maximum size, square footage allowed?
So that is the maximum square footage allowed for these spaces that exceed the maximum building height. If a rooftop amenity space came in below the maximum building height, let's say 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square feet, they would still only be able to count 1,500 of that towards urban open space requirements.
So the 1,500, I'm not understanding it. I don't think it's what you said. I'm just not understanding. The square footage of under the building that it goes on top of, does that affect that 1,500 square foot?
No, we chose to do a flat out, at least for rooftop amenities that exceed the building height, a flat out that you get 1,500 square feet instead of a percentage, because these are intended to be accessory spaces. And so we didn't want them to have the potential to get too large. So does that kind of help?
I think so. So that number is like a dual role. It can be used for the urban open space, but it's also the maximum size allowed to be built.
Right, correct.
Okay.
For rooftop amenities that exceed the maximum building height. And I'm sorry I keep repeating that. It's just kind of hard to wrap your head around sometimes. But yes, that is correct.
Wait, so now I'm confused. So is it 1,500 can count towards open space if it meets the other, if it's accessible, or it is limited to 1,500?
So it is limited to 1,500 square feet, and it has to be accessible to all of those in a development in order to count as open space. So with the North State,
I guess I'm getting hung up on the legalese. If you could maybe back up a slide, and then I'll read that while other questions are.
I was just gonna ask, can we unpack the last slide, the neighbors, proximity of the buildings? Are they afraid like somebody's gonna throw something off the building? I mean, why are everybody worried about the rooftop being there next to other structures?
I think the main concerns are privacy and some safety. We have heard, people express that concern of maybe throwing stuff off. But mostly I think it's privacy and things like light pollution, noise pollution, which is why we put in, some extra standards for lighting and noise for these specific spaces that exceed the maximum height.
But if this was a 25-foot tall building, you could do whatever you wanted with the top of it, as far as light and noise and throwing stuff off of it.
You would still have to comply with our lighting and noise ordinance, but these extra caveats of like the lighting being turned off at 11 or the use of sound amplifying equipment, they would not have to adhere to those, no.
Right. So this one being 10 foot higher in the air, it has issues. Okay.
Right.
Just making sure I had that right.
Are there any other buildings or projects in Huntersville other than North State that this would apply to?
Jack, I'm not sure if we have any current projects.
Yeah, so the answer to that is no. I think that was part of the concerns of the commissioners at the public hearing, that, this seems to be very pinpointed to just one project. Staff had we took this concept to the Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board back in October, which is in the staff report, and they said, this might make sense. So we worked, mainly Kaylee, preparing that ordinance. We brought it to them in January, and then in February had it voted on. And ultimately, they decided 4-4, so the split vote caused them not to endorse this because of the split vote. So to answer your question, no other building is proposed at this point in time that would take advantage of this section.
And if it's taking the place of the urban open space, are there any like greenery requirements? Are there any, or is it just, could they put out just, for example, like lounge chairs and concrete?
Yeah, so there is open space. So urban open space has to be within a quarter mile of all the lots in the development. So there's got to be multiple places in this particular one. Now, if it's just one building and they have it upstairs in this, then it can all be accomplished up there in that open space. As long as there's urban open space within a quarter mile of every unit, that's the requirement. And the North State development had a fairly big development, so there was other open spaces that were spread about. But it is conceivable that this could be just one building where the urban open space would be just that on the roof. Now, in terms of, is there other green space? Well, sure. There's setbacks off of property lines, and there's street tree planting, there is parking lot planting, so there is landscaping requirements for all developments. So it wouldn't be just asphalt and building and no trees, because we do require that. And I'm not sure, did I answer it?
Yeah, I wasn't concerned about the space below being, but I'm just thinking on the rooftop, there's no requirements for greenery there.
Yeah, that's
So
So it
we
could
actually,
theoretically, not that they would do this, but it could theoretically end up being lounge chairs on the rooftop.
so if you look on this section on the second graphic, it says improvements shall include but are not limited to, and landscape materials is one of those requirements. So as to how much they would put or propose, that is not specified, but landscape materials are a requirement of the space.
I think landscape materials is pretty big too. Pavers could be landscape material. Somebody could argue that. I think she wants grass or.
So you could, and you're kind of getting at the heart of whenever there's a development, we try to understand how's that urban open space being done so that we can avoid, 2 pavers and a bench, and I'm done. That's not meeting the intent of the ordinance. So that's why at the last development, we said, they need to show us what they're going to do in that urban open space. You did kind of see it on the project in the downtown. So you saw where the houses were going to front this yard. It didn't show the trees because it would have blocked it, but it showed you how they were, detailing the urban area, the urban open space. So we would be looking for that. I can appreciate if somebody says, well, the landscaping could be landscaping pavers. And so I'm done with that. So that's where we jump in and say, well, that's not, we'd show them pictures. Here's what an urban open space looks like. You've got these kind of structures, this type. So we would be asking for that. And then if we can't reach agreement on it, they can always appeal our decision. If we say, no, that's not accepted, that doesn't meet the requirement, then they can appeal it to the Board of Adjustments. Rarely happens, but that's the, I guess, the check-off valve in case we don't have an agreement.
Is there a difference, and apologies, maybe I should know this, but between urban open space and green space? It sounds like maybe some of the questions are more related to green space as opposed to urban open space. Is urban open space have requirements for greenery, like a minimum requirement that?
Not necessarily for greenery, but urban open space, in your packet, it's if you look, and
Under-
pages 6, 7, 8 through 13. So that describes and gives you visual examples of what urban open spaces are. And so when people propose developments, we're expecting them to meet those standards, and some of them are landscaped, some of them are ball fields, so you won't have that. So that would be how I would respond, and I don't know if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, that was perfect.
Yes. Go ahead. Knowing this applies to, all buildings that exceed the height, and I remember when we talked about this with the Ordinance Advisory Board, it was specifically for the North State project. Can you show us where they proposed that on the building? Like, was it on the Gilead Road side? I do not remember. Was it on the residential side?
So it is on, I apologize, I don't have, I'll go back to the graphic. There it was. So it is where Gilead Road will meet Public Street A, which is right now the road that goes right in front of Town Center, that little strip that leads in. So it'll be essentially adjacent to Town Center.
So that's the corner of Gilead and in the new road that
The
goes
new road.
perpendicular to Gilead?
Correct,
Okay, that's all I have right now.
One more clarification here, just stay on this side right here. So the one in the center here, that looks like it's more of like a 4-foot, 5-foot tall railing. Is that what we're seeing there? And then the other one is like alternate that has a lower railing but has a pergola. Is that like two different options?
So the one in the middle is probably like a parapet or something, and those are allowed to exceed, according to 8.7, by a certain amount. But then the one on the farthest right is actually showing the rooftop amenity space, I guess, on top of the pergola.
I gotcha.
So just for clarity purposes, if the text amendment isn't approved, then what you would see is the middle drawing.
Okay, I got you.
It would be a place for people to come out.
There wouldn't, okay.
Yeah, it would just be just a little architectural feature around there. And then if the text amendment is approved, then you might see something that is on the far right-hand side.
Okay, gotcha.
Normally, I'd want to wait until discussion, but both Frank and Jeff appear to have represented the planning board in regards to this matter at the HOAB. Is there anything you can share about those discussions with everyone prior to a motion?
Well, when it was voted on, and I'm going to make a comment about a comment Jeff made at one of them, but that to clear up, and when he sat in December for me, is that the vote went 4-4. But I don't think the vote was 4-4, and Jack, correct me, I look back through the minutes and the things, I don't think it went 4-4 because people were opposed to the idea of rooftop amenities. I think it went 4-4 is because some of the members felt it didn't go far enough. Because it was being designed for one project versus what might happen, and it will happen. But that said, and Jeff can speak to this, is that in December, it was in the minutes, he made a comment about how do you get credit for open space if you don't let other members of the development go? Because the ordinances say if all members of or all residents of a development do not have access to open space, you can't give credit for it. And that is written into this ordinance, but it's kind of roundabout. So today, I'm going to go a little further than what you just asked. I talked to Catherine and Jack, and I think I understand what's going on. Right now, if North State does not allow other members of their community to use this open space, rooftop amenity, they do not get credit for open space. They have to allow everyone who lives in the townhomes and condos or whatever else they have there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But they could still build it, they just couldn't count it towards their open space.
Yes.
Correct. They can still build it, but cannot. And this goes for, the open space goes for amenity spaces, rooftop amenity spaces that exceed the maximum building height or do not exceed the maximum building height. But in this specific case, if it exceeds the maximum building height, but it's only accessible to that building and not the whole development, it would not be eligible to count as open space.
You have anything to add to what I said, Jeff?
No, I still have the same problems with it that I did then, so.
That's all.
You're going to say this for the third time, I'm still going to ask it, just to make sure I understand.
You're good.
The ordinance and how it addresses the 1,500 feet and being allowed towards count open space is consistent with what is in the ordinance today, correct? Let's say it did not exceed the maximum roof line.
Right.
Everything else is consistent with what we already have, correct? The 1,500 feet, it counts towards urban open space. That is consistent with what we have today. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. Jack, would you be able to speak to that?
Right today, we don't count, nobody's ever proposed rooftop to be an urban open space, so we haven't all counted that. And what we are saying is, if we're going to count that, then it needs to be one of these listed that's in here that were page 9 to 13 or whatever it is, and that's what we're doing. We're adding on page 12 and 13, we're adding that you could count that. Does that answer your question?
It does. I understood it the other way. I thought somebody could already get credit for it if it was not. So that is a nuance of what we're doing. That's what I was trying to
That's an
understand.
addition. Now, what they can do today is if nobody's exceeding the height and then they wanted to have the entire rooftop to an amenity, that they can do that today. They can have, amplified music and all that kind of stuff, but we're not going to count that as an urban open space requirement. And it's not until you get up above that height then that we start putting those restrictions on there about, that you can't have the lighting exceeding, and everybody has to meet that, but no amplified sound. So all of those, the 1,500 square feet, it just kind of kicks you into another category of conditions. And those conditions were set because we looked at other communities, Kaylee did, and then 2, there was concern from Huntersville Ordinance Advisory Board members, well, what about privacy, and what about noise, and what about light spillover? So these were some of the things that were kind of written in there.
Don't go away. General Planning Commission, or General Planning question for you. Is the concept of urban open space intended to serve only the community that it is being developed with, or is the concept of urban open space meant to be a community-wide space that whether you live there or not?
It is meant to be serving just the community that is provided. But if we are so lucky to have it that they want to open it up to the public, that's acceptable as well. But it is only there for the enjoyment of the people that live in the community, and that's because they do require service and maintenance and cost, and so, it is a fee that's added onto the HOA. If anybody were to take an urban open space and then donate it, such as the Greenway, okay? The Greenway is listed as an urban open space. They're not going to own it. They're going to dedicate that to Mecklenburg County. Mecklenburg County is going to maintain it but then they have the benefit of it. That would be an example of where the public would have access to the urban open space.
No more questions, only a comment, Jack, so thank you. I too was having an issue with the fact of, and my concept was urban open space is put there for the greater good of the community, but as Jack said, if in a planning principle, it's really for the enjoyment, benefit of that community. I've changed my attitude a little bit that maybe what they've crafted really does serve the purpose. So just a comment.
I might add to that, I know a number of us live in HOAs. During the pandemic, it's private property, period. It does not belong to the town because we pay to maintain it. But people don't realize that. So you get a lot of usage from people outside the community.
I have a number of questions.
Please.
If I could, first, I guess, just because it was the most recent, tie back to Jack's comment, did we find any rationale from any of these other towns or anything that leads us to believe that by going over the building height, that suddenly amplification and so on, that we are ratcheting down, not allowing, becomes an issue at said elevation where it doesn't exist prior? Because to me, to kind of tie it to something a bit recent in all our lives, I mean, this sounds like saying that it's okay to not wear your mask if you're sitting, but if you stand up, then things are different and you have to have your mask on. So is there any science behind this? Is there anything that says we are now over 48 feet and amplification is bad, but at 36 feet, it's okay?
So I think, based on the research I've done, some of these, like the sound amplification, the lights on the timer, I pulled directly from other ordinances that regulate this. And I think the idea behind it is that going above the maximum building height makes people uncomfortable. And so if we put some more regulations on it, will that ease the concern of privacy, light pollution, noise pollution? We do also know that these spaces can exist below the maximum building height and not have these regulations. But like I said, we're trying to make people more comfortable with going over the maximum building height. So that is why those regulations.
Thank you. Want to piggyback on that for a second?
I want to.
Sorry, go.
Go ahead, Jack.
Okay, well, that explains it. So just so everybody's clear, the town of Huntersville does have a noise ordinance. So regardless of this standard, there is a noise ordinance. Now, if anybody listened to the town board meeting last night, it's a reasonable standard. So a police officer will be called, they'll come out, they'll make a determination. So that's always going to be there. But just as Kaylee said, this did raise concerns from the Ordinance Advisory Board, such that they took 2 meetings to get something to them, and then they didn't ultimately approve it. But it's just like Kaylee said, it was just to try to address the issues. But even if regardless of whether it's amplified sound, not amplified, everybody's subject to the noise ordinance, and that's not going to change. They're also subject to our lighting ordinance, which is how much light you can emit off of the property or the glare that you create.
Right.
No, I was just going to add that if you remember all the wedding venues that we've recommended approval, if they had outside music, it was not allowed to be amplified. So that's nothing new for Huntersville.
I would agree, right? But if we're below a certain height, the way the standard ordinance is written, it's allowed, amplification is allowed as long as it's not violating the standard noise ordinance that currently exists with the town. And so I'm trying to call out with the nuance there. One of my other questions, because some of my other stuff fall in the discussion, so this doesn't get repeated twice and we can move on with this. But so we have this situation where clearly there is only one recipient of this text amendment, should it go through. staff have an opinion on why we wouldn't do an overall rooftop amenity text amendment that applies no matter what the height is, set a standard for everything, and then everybody fits under that.
Deferred.
I'll jump in. So this is one of these, we're going to crawl before we walk type things. So we believe that in the future, there'll be more of these, which is why we went to the Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board in the first place and say, we think there might be more of these. What do you think? They said, well, yeah, that makes sense, but we're concerned about what the rules are. So to answer your question, this is, if we see it, it's probably going to happen in apartment buildings and mixed-use buildings. So it's not going to happen in industrial buildings, and probably not office buildings. So we think it hits where it needs to be, but this will be a learning experience for us. And do I know for a fact that there'll be other buildings that would be looking to take advantage of that? No, the answer is no. We think that might be the case, which is why we brought it to the Ordinance Advisory Board, but we don't know.
Would it, and you all know me by now, I mean, I'm not discounting what you do. In this scenario, though, I mean, were you guys, I know you and Brian and everyone else on staff has a ton of free time. Were you guys just, I mean, did this idea just come to you? Or is North State really the initiator with the conversation and then it's manifested from there?
That's exactly how, just as it's written in the staff report. North State brought it up. We said, gosh, this might make good sense. Bounce it off. Kaylee was just on board. Kaylee, could you just do some research, found out some other rules and regulations, brought to HOAB? This might be okay. Let's see something first. So that was in October. And then December, January, we brought it through the draft.
Yeah.
And then in February, December, January, they did it. And by the way, the reason why this packet was so much stuff here, because the Ordinance Advisory Board had a lot of discussion, and the Ordinance Advisory Board wanted to make sure that you and the town board got the minutes so you can understand the nature of the discussion. And also, board members said, yeah, you need to share that. It didn't happen in vacuum. There was a lot of discussion, because there was. So that's why it's packet so thick.
And one last thing, and then I'll stop. So when we're talking about urban open space, so when the North State project was being approved, my understanding, at least maybe not technically, but in reality, the apartment complex with whatever, commercial on the bottom was essentially by right and viewed as a separate project. And so here in this scenario, when the apartment complex and the commercial below, that is all one leasing entity in terms of an investment. And the rest is individual ownership and an HOA. How is it that, it sounds like anyway, we would allow those two to intermingle when it comes to potentially counting as the development? How are we counting that entire expanse of a project as one when you have an investment entity as part of it? And I own a townhome there and whatever, and then those are usually created then to be sold at some point. So someone is going to buy this apartment complex down the road, again, as an investment, and they're on board with all these other people that live down the street, essentially, to, yeah, come use my roof. I don't understand how we're allowing that to be connected.
First off, let me try to answer it this way. It's a subdivision made up of the mixed-use building, townhomes, and single-family. So it's an entire development. So it's one development doing the whole thing. Now, they're going to sell off the apartments, right, to somebody, and then the townhome doing maybe single-family. But it's all one development. Second thing, urban open space. Let me say that Kaylee and I never even considered the urban open space when we were looking at this, because North State didn't need it. They got a quarter-mile open space. They got a whole park right across the street from them. They did not need the urban open space within the. So it was in the discussion with the HOAB that one of the members said, you know what? Could that work as an urban open space? It makes sense if it would, and maybe it would be an incentive. So that's when that blossomed, that urban open space idea. So I don't know if that gets to your points, but that's how I'd respond.
That works. Thanks, sir.
Any other questions or a motion?
I mean, I'm on board with Jeff. I don't know why we're doing it just for a tall building. I mean, it just seems silly. I think we should be doing it for every building that has a rooftop amenity.
I was going to piggyback off of Jeff as well, and that's when I brought up the 1,500 square foot question. If we're doing a text amendment, I don't know, maybe this should be discussion after a motion, but if we're doing a text amendment, to avoid having to do a text amendment to a text amendment, I didn't know if there should be some other standard. It's hard for me to understand 1,500 square foot for a 3,000 square foot property and a 30,000 square foot property.
Right, so I will also say that, this is obviously, this specific project prompted this text amendment. All the language, all the research I've done is really good information, and it's stuff that I may not have considered when I first started researching. And I do think in the future that we will probably do an amendment at some point for just rooftop amenity spaces, but that was not the goal with this specific text amendment. Zoning ordinances are living documents. They're made to be amended. And I don't know if it would be the right time to do an amendment just for overall rooftop amenity spaces.
And I have a response to that based on ordinance advisory board stuff that we went through, but I'll save that for the discussion once a motion is made.
Go ahead. We're kind of in a.
I want somebody else I can do it, but somebody else has got one go.
Well, I would like you to go ahead and answer. We're kind of in this weird hybrid discussion.
Look, how many four-story buildings do we have downtown right now? None. This is the first one. And I'm one of those people on the board. I'm not the person that said it first, but I agreed with what they said about let's go with the rooftop amenities. I wanted to go further. I understand maybe why they haven't, but we will. I'm not a developer, but I read and look at this stuff about what's going on in the world as far as urban areas and green space on top of buildings and restaurants and gardens, and that's where we're going. And recently, if I add on top of this, we've had recent discussions in the board meetings and the retreat about who are we, Huntersville? Oh, are we the bedroom community for Charlotte? Are we Chapel Hill? Well, no, we're none of those. We're not McAdenville either. We are Huntersville, and I think we're a unique place. We're at the opportunity. When I moved here 26 years ago, we were the fastest growing city in the United States. 500% we grew. And it's still going on, and we're going to grow. And if we want a real downtown, it's going to have to grow up, and that's a pun, but it'll have to grow up. So we need to look at this, and we need to find, and yes, and what Jack said makes sense. This is the first time they're crawling before we walk and run. So who else is asking for an open space on a rooftop amenity right now? No one. So, to me, I think we see what happens. I think this is a good thing. I know that that's some people whose opinion I respect in this community do not agree with me with that, but I respect their opinions, but that's the way I feel about it.
Thank you. Frank. We do have a long history of when something is not in the ordinance, drafting a text amendment to allow specifically that. Does it mean we get it right the first time? No, but it is frequently iterative, and you got to start somewhere, so.
And normally, I'm against writing a specific text amendment to support a development.
But any other
This is-
development
this
could
is
happen
different.
under these
This is
same terms.
unique.
For whatever it's worth, for my fellow board members that reference me in that, I am more comfortable with the answer as it relates to why this one and sort of easing into it. I appreciate staff's answer to that, and I'm more comfortable with that focus. I mean, that I guess that just means that I am looking forward to when it gets addressed on a broader level, and that those opportunities can be used, and that we actually see those in downtown.
And I'm not against, I'm totally for the rooftop amenity. I was just maybe saving time later, even though it might be more headache now. If the 1,500 is based off of North State property, can we come up with a formula to say the next four-story building that does come along and makes this request, that there's a standard that this is what you can allow square footage-wise? The 1,500 is based off of North State, not this next property that comes along.
Well, wasn't this based on a distillation of, I saw Asheville, Palo Alto?
Yeah, so there is, I can't remember the exact municipality, but they actually limited theirs to 500 square feet. So we are talking about these spaces that exceed the height, right? So there's issues with that, uncomfortability. So we put these regulations to make people more comfortable. Part of that is making the space smaller. You want a 5,000 square foot rooftop amenity, go for it. Just put it under the maximum building height. And in the future, when we do, look to do an amendment like this, I think this text amendment would be valuable to see how the language has worked and maybe what is agreeable and what is not agreeable. And we'll have some time to kind of learn what kind of language we want to take over and put into an overall rooftop amenity text amendment.
So the idea being this could be the skeleton, and we see what works, and, we'll clone it over, but just change 2 or 3 words to make it
Correct,
work
yeah,
better.
change what hasn't worked and what we think needs to be improved.
I feel some consensus about the direction the board is going with this, so I think it would be a good time to get a motion on record and then continue under discussion. Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion in considering the proposed amendment TA 21-15. The Planning Board recommends approval based on the amendment being consistent with policies LU 8, LU 8.2, LU 11, LU 11.1, DT 1.1, DT 1.4, and DT 11.1 of the Huntersville 2040 Community Plan. It is reasonable and in the public interest because the town, as the town continues to grow, will take on more urbanized form, and we expect to see greater desire for rooftop amenities.
I'll second it.
In a way, I think it's unfortunate that, obviously, it's a text amendment, but it is spurred by a very controversial development that happened, that's been approved. It was approved by a previous board, I'll just say it, and it's still a lightning rod. But that should not change our ability to sit here and look at something that's a text amendment if it really does, if we think that it's going to enhance whether it's one project or all projects. And I feel like there is a consensus here that we all feel like some sort of, urban open space is an amenity to a building. Okay, if we agree with that, the next step is it the height we're worried about? And I think, in a lot of ways, some of this height has been probably arbitrarily picked anyway. It's like the mask. You wear a mask when I'm sitting down or standing up. I mean, the height was somewhat arbitrary. So let's not penalize an existing or proposed development because if we can improve upon it. I think this gives the ability to improve upon one project, unfortunately, but it also sets a standard that hopefully encourages, as the staff has said, hopefully encourages future developers to come along and say, you know what, if I can get credit for my urban open space, I'd like to do that. Again, my attitude has changed. I thought that the urban open space should have been a community-wide benefit. But like Frank said, hey, that community is paying for that, so maybe it should be limited. So with all that being said, I'm actually fine. I'm in supportive, and I think the staff has done a wonderful job trying to craft something, look at a number of different cities. So thank you all.
I'll just reiterate a couple of the comments I made prior to the motion about how, in my experience being here, this is generally how new ideas are shaped. One developer has one request that we've never thought of before, but it's crafted broadly enough that they're not just the exception. Anybody can now play both of those rules, and anybody could now do this if they so choose. It's also been an iterative process that we've gone back and reinvestigated several text amendments until we get it right. Not that this is necessarily wrong, but there could always be improvements as things change. So I think this is a healthy and normal process as we try to grow up, as Frank said so eloquently and punfully.
I need to ask a question about the motion. Did you include 7.2? No, use 7.2?
No, but I'll allow an amendment.
Well, then I ask you to amend that. If you look at the bottom of page 1 of 3 of the staff report, it has that listed also.
What is 7.1?
And anything else, that you've heard what I have to say. So
We are not required, though, to go with every single one that they have, correct? I mean, I typically pick and.
No, and sometimes I add more, but if he went from the staff report, yes.
Okay, but so you agree with 7.2 and would like.
Yes, I do.
Only because I respect Frank so much, I'll accept that amendment to add 7.1.
But I won't start any fires tonight.
And I will also second or accept the amendment. Anyone else comments on this? Greg?
I'm just right down the middle, and I want to say, like, in one of the comments that Scott made, I hope I'm not intending this to be penalize the developer. I think it is unfortunate that, I know they want to get the ball rolling, and they don't want to wait. But I'm also thinking, it's a text amendment. I was thinking more kick it back to get the text amendment right. Not so much as far as penalizing the developer, because I'm in support of rooftop amenities. I'm sticking on that 1,500 is what's bothering me. I don't want to delay this 6 months, but I also want to get it right, I guess, so to speak.
Greg, actually, I agree with you in the sense that let's get it right, and I'm with you with it's kind of crazy that we develop an ordinance and we just pick some number. We rarely do it. Like I said, it's usually some formula that we come up with. But I will go back to what Brian said, and I think it's important, is like, this is still supposed to be an accessory use. Like, this is not ever intended to be like, a party room up there. So, I'm fine. 1,500 square feet is a pretty good size area. So again, I'm with you that normally I'd look at it and say, hey, let's have some formula so everybody knows what it is. But we are talking about downtown Huntersville, which is probably where this is going to be. How, are we ever going to have a 150,000 square foot building that's going to need 2,500 square feet? If it does, at that point, let's readdress it. So I respect what you guys are saying, and I think ordinarily I'd say yes, but in this case, without better evidence, 1,500 kind of, honestly, terrible thing to say, kind of feels right. So.
What I would say about this is it's a use, it's an option that I want to see available. I actually have a better understanding of what staff's intention was here. They've done an excellent job crafting this language, and I would be fine starting with this. The reason why I won't be voting for this, though, in favor of this, is because this feels exactly like it would if a particular attorney that comes before the board quite often would have drafted a text amendment very specific to that attorney's client that has such a limited scope, and then we vote on it. And instead, what we have is staff has done all the work. And staff is the one putting it forward. And there's a true applicant here, in my mind, and it's not the town of Huntersville. And so they should be the ones crafting it. And I got to tell you, at this point, after what I've heard, if it was exactly the same, but it was North State that's requesting the text amendment, I'd be fine. I would vote in favor of it. And again, I look forward to the additional things. But with this, I just, especially with, it's just, to me, that's looking as poor form, and I don't mean disrespect, but.
Well, Jeff, maybe the opposite's true. Maybe they thought that the best way to do it was to put their request to staff and say, you guys craft it in a way that you think is best for the town. So maybe it's the opposite. Instead of poor form, maybe it's trying to be a good team player.
Then in that case, why not apply it to all rooftops?
So we also gave them several other options, like amending their conditional rezoning for this specifically to, so this wasn't the only avenue. And like Jack has spoke to before, we felt that this could have merit for other projects.
Yeah, so just to be clear, if the only reason staff brought this forward, and if I had any inclination that the discussions would be, from October to where we are at to next, we might have reconsidered. But the reason why we brought it is we saw this it made sense. But rather than us prepare that text amendment or say, applicant, you prepare it, because if they prepared it, it would have been 750 square feet or whatever they wanted, that's how they would have drawn it. So we took the initiative, Kaylee in particular, the initiative, let's analyze it. Then let's go to the HOAB and get some feedback. Yes, we think that might make sense. Let's see a draft. We do a draft. Okay, it sounds pretty good, but we suggest to do this. So we made these other adjustments. So, I can appreciate all the comments that are being made, but to be clear, North State, this does what North State wants and does more than that. I mean, because they're looking at actually half of the size. They wanted 750 square feet. So we didn't write it for them. We wrote it for a broader audience. And so and they don't need the urban open space. So they don't need that, whatever there's to be an urban open. So a lot of this stuff that we have, they don't even need. It's what we put in there based on feedback.
Any other questions? All right. So we have a motion to approve as written. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed? 2. All right. Motion passes 7-2.
Thank you all.
All right. Well, I had projected us being out of here about 10:45. So anybody got ideas what to do for the next hour and a half? Just kidding. I couldn't. This is an easy one. Yeah, I couldn't let another night go by without a terrible joke. Motion to adjourn.
Hold on, before you. I got a text amendment,
Transit Station.
2202, did you not get the email?
No,
That was critical, need to know information.
I'm glad we are still working, so.
I thought that was part of your joke.
No, I wish. I'm going to nominate Jeff to take over as chair for the rest of the night since, anyway, transit station.
So very quickly, so in 4 different districts, neighborhood residential, neighborhood center, town center, and highway commercial district, there's this provision. Provision 3 says if you're doing a major subdivision, which is basically a subdivision with streets, and stormwater, and all that kind of stuff, the aggregate number of dwelling units contained in attached houses, apartment buildings, and mixed-use buildings shall not exceed 30% of the total number of dwelling units in the project. So if I got a 100-unit development, then I can have 30 attached, whether they're apartments, mixed-use buildings, et cetera. Then there's another section that says, notwithstanding that limitation, and in any section of major subdivision within a 1/4 mile of a designated rail transit station, the percentage of dwelling units contained in it, again, attached houses, apartment buildings, and mixed-use buildings is not limited. And the higher overall density is encouraged within a 1/4 mile of rail transit station. Rail transit stations are those locations designated by a resolution adopted by the Board of Commissioners of Town of Huntersville. So the board saying, look, back from 1990s all the way up to basically 2013, Norfolk Southern was a willing partner with CATS and local communities to provide rail transit. 2013, their management changed, and they said, we no longer want to share our rail line with commuter. And so the Board of Commissioners, feeling that, well, why would we still have this provision in here to give density bonus for something that Norfolk Southern said they're not in the game for? And so that's why they asked us, the staff, to go ahead and prepare this text amendment on behalf of the town board members. This is the definition of major subdivisions, and there's 3 rail transit stations, one at Hambright, which now we call Brighton, one in downtown, and one at Sam Fur. So the board, again, is asked that this text amendment be done because, rail is not coming anytime soon. So there are 3 transit stations. So what I did was, this shows you the zoning districts around these stations. Starting north and heading south, this is the Sanford station. So I put the star where the station is designated. The 4 districts that are affected by this that have that other provision that you can exceed it: neighborhood residential, town center, neighborhood center, and highway commercial. That's not the only districts that we have you can exceed it. You can do a TND and exceed it, or a TOD, a transit-oriented development district. But here's what I want to say about this project or this site. You'll notice that big orange CD just above the star. That is a new development that came in less than a year ago. Brian handled the rezoning case, and they were looking to do all attached units. And so we, as a staff, said, well, you don't need to be going for trying to rezone it to transit-oriented development zoning, because the rail's not coming anytime soon. That, if you did a TOD zone, your minimum density is 18 units an acre, and it goes up from there. So now that we know Norfolk Southern's out of the game, we would not recommend you go TOD, but we did recommend a TND. That's what they did. As a matter of fact, the project that you had before you tonight, right down the street here, they rezoned. They have 100% attached. They rezoned to TND, which allows 100% attached. So I just wanted to point out that there are some other options if somebody wants to do 100% attached. But with this text amendment, this property that is not part of the already TND owned zone, which are these right in here, these are neighborhood residential, they would no longer qualify for more than 30% attached. To be frank with you, they're not very deep lots. They're not, I mean, it's not a big, it probably wouldn't develop under that anyway. So TND, they could go with that. In the downtown area, we have a huge section of red, which is town center. We have a lot of yellow, which is neighborhood residential. There's little sections of neighborhood center, but they're not inside of that quarter mile. And there is no highway commercial. So again, anything in here that's zoned either town center or neighborhood residential wouldn't qualify for this. Again, if they wanted to maybe rezone to TND, you can see there's a huge TND in Brighton. Vermillion is all TND, so they could extend that. So that's another option. In the case of Brighton, they actually have a TOD zone, but that was back in 2006 when Norfolk Southern saying, yes, we're going to do this, and they we moved the rail line off of 115. Those of you might remember, the rail line used to be right up against 115, and that was a big problem because to widen 115, we were going to eat into the schools. So we needed to move the rail line so that you could have a development around it, and then we can expand 115 without impacting our schools. My point here is most of everything in Brighton area is already zoned for that, and really CMS owns all the property. There's just a little slivers of neighborhood residential that will be affected by it. So I'm mentioning all that to say in the downtown area, there are 2 developments that did take advantage of that provision. The North State development, which has the apartments here, townhomes here, and then the single family here, and then Vermillion Village. Those 2 proposed developments took advantage and utilized that quarter mile within the transit station and qualify. Vermillion Front did not. I just want to be clear. Vermillion Front was part of Vermillion that was approved in the 90s. So that in the development that we approved earlier today, the West, Hill Street West, yeah, those are all part of Vermillion that were approved back in the 90s. So that they're, and by the way, they're zone TND. So, you know, literally, if this, you know, if this is all TND and then somebody wants to expand the TND, that would have been another option to go TND. And there's other options over here. So the whole crux of this is that the town board wanted to adopt this standard because rail is not coming anytime soon. There are some other options. People will go through rezoning process, and the town board, the planning board have more flexibility on rezonings. So this is the language that is in the ordinance that's being proposed. Staff supports it. Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board recommended approval, 7-1, and we are happy to answer any questions.
So the net impact of this is that the by right, more than 30% of attached in neighborhood residential is going away.
Correct. Within that quarter mile.
But that can still be achieved if you go through a rezoning process.
That is absolutely an option. You do have to be careful because you don't want little spot zoning. So that becomes illegal if there's a, you know, 1 acre parcel here. I mean, you have a bunch of spots. So but if you're expanding an existing TND, that yes, then that's another option available. Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but I got a motion unless there's someone that does have a question.
Jack, what if I was fortunate enough to be able to buy a block? Or there's a parcel right now on, I think, First Street or something, 0.8 of an acre, roughly. Say I could afford that, and I want to put a bunch of townhomes on it instead of like building duplexes like a couple that's gone over there, or something like that. Using that example, could I do that? Could I just do all townhomes?
Chances are that's going to be a major subdivision because there's going to be some storm drainage issues there, and they're going to go from one lot to another. So
Yeah.
I'm, you know, every site is different, but I suspect that's going to fall into a major subdivision because there's going to be stormwater conveyance over multiple lots.
Gotcha. So I'm not going to get by right out of that.
So you would not be able to do that. However, if you'll note, the way the ordinance is written, it's saying the percentage of dwelling units contained in attached houses, which is townhomes, apartment buildings, and mixed-use buildings are limited. So to answer your question, if you just struck out the apartment building and the mixed-use building, but you allowed that opportunity for an attached building, that would be the way to do it. In other words, it wouldn't be this whole ordinance strikeout, but it would be a limited strikeout of apartment buildings and mixed-use buildings, and we left in the language exactly like it is, but we just do it for attached houses, which are townhomes. That's how you would achieve what you're talking about. But if you're a major subdivision, that would not qualify if this text amendment goes through.
So and like you said, I mean, every parcel and situation is going to be a little different. If I take that same parcel, though, and instead of, because now that I think about it, townhomes conveys the land as well. Say I built a condo complex there. I could go vertical as much as the ordinance allows me and jam as many condo units as I can on that parcel by
It'd be 36.
36 feet. So I could do 3 stories of however many units fit per story.
On one building, yes.
That would be by right? Correct. Regardless of TOD?
That'd be correct, right.
Okay.
Yeah, so, you know, again, when it becomes a major, so the way the ordinance is written today, this exceeding the 30% attached is dealing with major subdivisions.
Okay.
And so that's what it hits.
Only because what's a major subdivision? Just, I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt everybody.
I apologize because I just said, well, here's the major subdivision. So the creation of any new public streets, if there's involvement of any park or greenway or open space on adopted plan, multi-building site, so you have like multiple buildings on one site, installation of drainage improvements through one or more lots to serve one or more lots, and the installation of private wastewater plant or private water supply for one or more lots. So that's what will hit the major subdivision.
So this is a little bit of editorialization. I think the goal of the town board here is to try to make sure there can't be lots of attached by right using the transit station as a cost. So, and then force that through a rezoning process if someone wants that, so it gets a public hearing and getting voted on. In the downtown area, would it be spot zoning in all those neighborhood residential to go to town center?
No.
That's, okay.
But remember now, the text amendment for town center is being affected by this as well. So if you're zoned town center, so you couldn't do this either. So now, the other thing that's off here to the side is we have a downtown plan, the downtown steering committee. So nothing is lost on us or the steering committee that if you want a vibrant downtown for businesses, you do need residents in there, right? So you do need that. So when they're finished with their job, which will be, July, August, September, there will be code changes, and it might multiply things, but it won't be based on transit, okay? So don't think, as a matter of fact, be ready. When the downtown plan is finished, there's going to be recommendations of changes. And it might be, instead of 4 stories, 3 stories, or instead of 4 stories, 6 stories. I don't know what it's going to be, but and then we need to do. So that is in the offing. So it's going to be based, I would dare say, whatever recommendations they have is going to be based on whatever's going to be good to support a mixture of businesses in the downtown, but not necessarily for transit.
Yes, I've kind of spent some time on this, and I wanted to go through a couple scenarios just to make sure I'm right. And first of all, disclosing, I'm not working with any property owner under contract with any of this. I don't own property other than the one we spoke about, and it's totally unrelated. I mean, that was a T&D. But I've looked at several sites trying to understand this, because when you really dive into it, there's a lot of things that don't make sense to me. And one is I've never really understood the problem. Like, define the problem. Is it because we have a transit stop? I've heard the word unlimited density is an issue. But I really want to try to understand the problem. So I looked at 3 sites just on my own, is doing some sketches. One site had 9 lots existing, so 9 lots today, 3 different owners. Say, okay, what could you do? You go through, as the ordinance is today, you could put townhomes in there. 12, 15, 16 townhomes, maybe more. And those are all individual owned townhomes based on the way the ordinance is written today. Major subdivision. You would probably have roadway improvements and everything. If we go with the ordinance as here, you couldn't do that. So what could you do? Well, as Jeff was saying, maybe you put an apartment building in. You could put the same number of units as an apartment building. Is that a win for the town? And that's where I get stuck. Is that a win? And that's where I get, kind of wrapped up into this. Now, you can rezone to the T&D, and like Jack was saying, in small infill projects, it gets a little bit difficult, depending on what you're close to. If you're close to other T&D or parks or schools, it makes it an easier, sell. But I really struggle with taking away the ownership of townhomes when the density doesn't change. Now, if we were comparing, 30 units versus 12 or something, and the goal was to reduce density, then I could see the intent.
Yeah. Density, to some people it is. To me, the allowance of density in the downtown area has never been the issue. It's how you allowed that density. You have, and if you look at these lines here, they're 99% the same line. We have allowed unlimited by right, unlimited, not 30%, not whatever, unlimited density allowed in these areas based on the fact that they will exist within a non-existent entity. There's no commuter rail, there's no associated rail transit stations, but we're allowing the density of the town to be dictated by right based on those. And going back to the intent of, I think, the two commissioners that brought this up, I mean, my interpretation of their intent was to remove that. Then you can go on to a discussion about the density and how you want to approach this. We got a committee right now looking at all this also. And I think that we will see changes to allow things that are there. There'll still be density. What was one of my notes? Approval of TA 22-02 will not limit density within these zones. They are described, as described by the planning department, a variety of building types and rezoning options are available, and I think other options will become available to answer the questions that Jay had.
And also think that two things that are related but unrelated, we're talking about the transit station, and then we're talking about downtown. It's almost like this all focuses on downtown and applies more to the downtown area. You know, perhaps it's delayed to the, you know, or having the steering committee, you know, come up with a recommendation rather than, you know, stop it now, maybe start it up in a few months. I really feel like that the transit is not as related to the downtown as it is the density and the development that needs to be sort of shaped around the downtown.
So, Jay, you made some really great points about what is a win for the town. And I think that's, this somewhat addresses that. And again, we're in discussion, but these text amendments are a funny thing. I think the intent is to remove the transit station that doesn't exist from being the boundary, the divider. If you're on this side of something that doesn't exist, you can go unlimited, as Frank said. If you're on that side of something that doesn't exist, you're restricted. To remove that from the discussion. I think the mistake in this is removing that from the town center zoning district. To me, the town center zoning district should exist for whatever the downtown steering committee decides. If you're in that district, if they say, we want more density here, or more attached housing, or whatever, town center district can do that, but all the neighborhood residential should not have unlimited density. And then that forces it through what I feel the commissioners want is, if you want to upzone, if you want to have 100% attached, you have to go through a public process. Take it away from a by right decision attached to something that doesn't exist. So working through this, Jack, I don't know if there's a way to, I mean, this is our opportunity to weigh in on this. I feel like that this should be workshopped in that way. To go with what I feel the intent of the commissioners is, make it so that the zoning districts that lose the ability to do this, have it be the neighborhood residential, but to pull town center apart from that. Is that something that we could do here in this sitting?
So that's not the text amendment that's before us.
I agree.
If I were to try to phrase what you're talking about.
Because I did a poor job.
I don't think you're advocating, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the town center within a quarter mile ought to not have that 30% cap attached. I think what I heard you say is if you have town center, there shouldn't be a 30% cap of attached houses in major subdivisions, just like TND.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
And then if somebody is neighborhood residential and does want to exceed that, then they could rezone to a TND or a town center. Is that
Yeah, you solved the problem.
captured it?
Yes. And I know that's it's not what's been presented.
That's not the town boards, they've asked us to prepare, but that's how you would achieve what you're talking about.
I feel, and I guess this is obviously not something we're going to be able to settle on tonight. But I feel like that gets back to the heart of the matter, is what they're trying, I feel what they're trying to prevent is arbitrary upzone relative to this, and they want to push it through a zoning process. To me, that you need to redefine what the zones do in order to do that.
Well, if I were to say when the downtown plan is done, I do see that there's a strong relationship of having rooftops in proximity to support the businesses, not just on the weekends, but so there is that. And then if I were conjecture, they might say, well, town center could be the place to do that. But we're going to limit the footprints. We're not going to get a 200-unit apartment complex. It's going to be something small, maybe smaller infill type of this apartment, smaller infill. So I have no idea what's going to come out of that. But it would not surprise me if there are going to be changes to the zoning ordinance as a result of recommendations from the downtown plan. But that's going to have to play out because they're going to look at this whole thing. And it's not just the land uses, but it's also the transportation end of things and the infrastructure side of things as well.
I've got some ideas, but they shouldn't be, hold up the rest of this meeting. I'll table that. Who else has any issues or comments? Frank, would you like to make a motion?
I'm ready to make a motion. Sure.
So the board forces this down on you guys. You guys write the text amendment. Doesn't matter whether we say yes or no, they get the final vote, right? Just making sure I understand what's going on.
Yes. Okay. The only thing I would say is not that the board forces us. The board has the ability to propose text amendments. We do, and the planning board does. And so that this is, and to be frank with you, we said we're not opposed to it because we're not opposed to it. Because again, it causes a lot of frustration and angst that there's somebody who's getting density for a train station that's not coming anytime soon. So,
You ready? Yep. The planning board recommends approval of TA 22-02, allowed density near rail transit stations as written. The proposed amendment is consistent with Huntersville 2040 Community Plan policies, LU 2.1, LU 5.1, LU 10.1, LU 11.1, DT 1.1, DT 1.2, DT 1.3, DT-2, DT 11.1, and DT 11.2. It is reasonable and the public interest to amend the zoning ordinance because 1, TA 22-02 removes any reference of allowed density based upon the proposed location of rail transit stations. 2, a variety of residential building types and rezoning options are still allowed by the zoning ordinance.
Seconded.
I go, on this one, I go and keep it simple, stupid. The board asked for this to happen. I totally agree with it, as you well know, before I even came here. So maybe I did have a preperceived notion, forgive me. But, because I've talked about this for several years, we should not base our density of any type based on something that doesn't exist and doesn't appear will exist in our future. And I think now that said, what you said, Stephen, is right. The next step is this goes to the town board, and it's the town board's responsibility in coordination with the public to come up with how they want to replace this, if they want to replace it, in what direction we want to go. They're the elected officials, and they are elected by the people, and the people will tell them what they think, because I hear them tell them all the time. But so I think we take this out, and then the rest is going to fall where it is.
Thanks, Frank. I jumped in to second it because I didn't want all my comments and problem solving to get away from the issue that I do support removing the non-existent transit station from decision-making. And any other problem solving goes beyond that.
Do we need to put anything in our motion about moving forward with the problem solving, or anything like that? Or just let it play out and let it take 2 years and have Jay up here doing T&Ds?
The practical answer is, I officially represent this board on the Downtown Steering Committee. And if either publicly or privately, and if you have suggestions, share them with me, and I'll share that with the steering committee. And I already have some that I want to bounce off Jack as soon as we're done.
Mr. Chairman, I actually have a substitute motion.
Okay, we'll hear it.
Okay. I would simply like to make a motion that this get tabled until the public hearing is closed. We typically do not, I can't say that in the motion. That's my motion, that this be tabled until the public hearing has been closed.
Well, I'll second it just so we can now discuss it.
Okay, thanks. Not that we're not allowed, but typically we don't. We don't make this. The town board extended the public hearing due to one of the, I guess we don't call them sponsors or co-sponsors, whatever, but essentially that's what it was, not being present for the public hearing. And so it was extended till April 4th, and that's what I think. So while we're discussing, I'm not opposed in the least bit to removing this. I'm not a fan of, in politics they'll talk about repeal and replace. I'm not a fan of when they repeal and don't replace, right? And so we have the replacement, we at least hope, coming from the current downtown steering committee. So I would likely also push to wait for that. But at a minimum, the public hearing's open, and that's my rationale, because typically precedent is we don't vote on something until that's closed. So I'll stop.
Was there a second?
It was seconded, which was how.
Okay, then my comment is that the reason the public hearing was held motion, you're right, was held motion because the person who asked this to take place was dealing with a family matter at the time. And I can tell you right now what he's going to say when he comes back for the public hearing. He's going to say, and so I see no reason to hold this up.
I don't disagree one bit, but the board that's asked us to look at this is also the same board that felt it necessary to hold the public hearing open, is just my rationale. I believe me, I know how that conversation's going to go. But
There was a public hearing. They held it open because the person who initiated this wasn't there to endorse what his request. I see no reason to extend. So that means it won't go until May. Because technically, if we make a recommendation, Jack, is this correct? They could discuss it on the first meeting of the month, and they could vote on it that day. Correct?
I'm not sure what day you're talking about.
April 4th? They'll reopen the public meeting on 4 April.
Right.
So that when they finish the public hearings, they'll get into the items, and they could add this item for a vote that night.
Not if there's not a recommendation from the planning board. So you have to have a planning board recommendation.
They'll close the well, let's assume they're going to close the public hearing then on April 4th. They cannot vote on it because we have not made a recommendation.
If your motion passes.
If my motion passes. In the meantime, the public hearing is still open for the public to be heard.
So at this point, we have a motion, I guess I didn't say the word, but it's a motion to defer from you, defer decision.
I should have said that more properly.
I'll have heard that as a motion to
Take the
defer.
gavel back. I don't deserve it.
All in favor of deferring?
I'm sorry, I was not clear on who seconded that motion.
I seconded it.
You seconded
to
it.
get us into discussion.
Okay.
Those in favor of deferring the decision? Those against deferral? All right, the motion is defeated. So we're back to the original motion from Frank.
I apologize, but this is all recorded. Is that right, Larry, to make sure we get, because that it's recorded as to who voted yes and who voted no? Good. I'm sorry, because Tracy's not here, and Kimberly's helping out, and Larry's helping out. I just want to make sure that I'm not in trouble when Tracy gets back.
My name is Bob.
So for the record, that was a motion to defer from Jeff, seconded by Stephen. Jeff and Jay were for deferral. Everyone except Scott was against deferral. Scott abstained. So the motion was defeated. Now we're back to the original motion from Frank to pass as written.
You want me to read it again?
No.
Okay.
Just his abstaining counts as a yes vote, correct? Yeah.
I just wanted to say, with some of Jay's comments and questions, I had same thing. And this is totally speculative on my behalf, but I feel like it potentially originated because some folks were against some developments that recently were passed. Whether this accomplishes their goal for density, I don't know that it does, slowing down density or decreasing density. But I probably will vote for approval just simply because the word just doesn't seem to relate to anything. I don't know that it accomplishes their goals for what they were trying to perform, but it seems arbitrary, the actual wording to a transit station at this point. So I'm okay with removing it just for that purpose alone, not for a density purpose.
I'm just going to say that I agree. I feel like that this imaginary transit line is arbitrary. And because of the arbitrary nature, I'm completely okay with removing it. Whether the end goal is one thing or another doesn't really matter. It's so random. If you're on this side, it's fine. If you're on this side, it's not. No.
Agreed. Any other comments? All right. Jeff?
Yeah, I was just going to say even though my feelings are hurt a little bit, no, I'm kidding. Now, I would agree, I find it arbitrary because the thing it's tied to doesn't exist. But I have been on public record many a time, and to the disagreement of many around downtown, but the density still belongs. The definition of downtown in the dictionary pretty much covers that. So, but again, I am not a fan of just repealing this and then letting it linger out there and hoping that something else comes. So when the something else is decided, then I'm absolutely ready to do it all at once and get rid of this because it doesn't belong.
Seeing no further interest in comment, valid motion to approve as written. All in favor? Opposed? 1, 2. All right, motion passes.
Do you want to name the names again?
No, we're good. I know. I know. He's not in trouble. I'm not going to be in trouble.
I can feel it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's all recorded.
Well, if I can get a check to make sure I have actually done the full agenda at this point.
Yeah, that was good.
Very good. Thanks, everyone. Shall I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, in favor?